I'll start with a welcome note in about 2 minutes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of British Council, I am pleased to welcome all of you to Day 2 of the South Asia Leadership for Gender Equality Summit. We bring today's deliberations with a special forum that will explore the concept of representation from the lived experience of the women who sit on this panel. Women's full and equal participation in all facets of society is a fundamental human right. Yet, around the world, from politics to entertainment to the workplace, women and girls are largely underrepresented. Building a sustainable future for all means leaving no one behind. Women and girls are critical to finding solutions to the biggest challenges that we face today and must be heard, valued, and celebrated throughout the society to reflect their perspectives and choices for their future and that of the advancement of humanity. To guide us through this important and interesting discussion, we have Deepa Sundara Rajan, Assistant Director, Society, British Council, India. In her current role, Deepa leads on gender, equality, diversity, and inclusion with the British Council in India. Deepa has been working in the development sector for nearly 23 years, with a focus on gender and education, particularly in the rural contexts. She has had a diverse experience of working in government programs and international humanitarian organizations, and as an alumnus of Tata Institute of Social Sciences, she is a social worker by qualification, specializing in urban and rural community development. Before I hand over the session to the moderator, a few housekeeping rules that I'd like to lay out. The session is for 50 minutes duration and will end at 14:50 Indian Standard Time. There will be a buzzer 5 minutes before the session is scheduled to end. For participants, there is a Q&A section in which you can add your questions. Please note that this session is being recorded. I now hand over to Deepa to moderate this session.
Thank you so much, Pooja. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very interesting session on representation. Before I begin, I just wanted to share with you that originally, Janaka Pushpanathan, the Director, South India for British Council, was supposed to moderate this session. Unfortunately, due to a major power failure in her locality, she's unable to join and I've had to step in. I've had to step in. So without further ado, I'll just get into the session. Yesterday, we spent quite a lot of time to actually explore the whole idea of women's leadership and feminist leadership. And there were some really interesting ideas that were shared by the panelists yesterday. We also looked at issues that impact women and girls, and also non-binary genders pertaining to violence, pertaining to the socio-economic impacts of this COVID-19 and pertaining to climate change. All these have a bearing on the real life situations of women, men, and non-binary genders across all countries in South Asia. So it seems to be like a natural next step to talk about how women can be in those positions whereby they can make a difference. And that brings us to the topic for today, which is on representation matter, how to move from inequality to equality. We have a very eminent panel of speakers. We have an elected representative herself from Bangladesh, Honorable Member of Parliament Salima Ahmed. We have Gayani D. Alvis, who is the Global Chairperson of Women in Logistics and Transport, based in Sri Lanka. We have Abia Akram, who is Chairperson the National Forum of Women with Disabilities from Pakistan. And we have Nishta Satyam, who is Deputy Country Representative of UN in India. So I will immediately launch into the session and invite Honorable Member of Parliament, Ms. Salima, to give her opening remarks. Ms. Salima, my question to you basically is, please do share with us your journey into the life of politics, and also a question on why is it that we see fewer women in politics? What are some of the enablers and constraints for women in political life? Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, you're on mute.
A very good afternoon to you all. I would like to give thanks to British Council and Shahnaz Karim for putting me here. This subject is very close to my heart. And as you are saying, asking me to say about my journey, it is too long because I started my journey quite young age. I was married when I was 16 years old. I was a mother when I was 17 years old. But in that journey, I also understood that I need to be educated, I need to be economically empowered, because I have seen the inequalities between which was prevailing with our mother or grandmother or the elderly sister. So I didn't want to put myself into that position. So I educated myself and started my own business. But again, doing the business, I came into the trade politics. I was the mainstream trade, trade body like Chamber of Commerce leader, where men and women are there. But I was the only one. When I was traveling in an export trade fair or whenever I was having a business meeting, it is only me. And that gives me a really wake-up call that our numbers are so low that our voice cannot be heard. So we need to engage more women into that basket, and how we can do it. And so I formed the Bangladesh Women Chamber of Commerce and Industry. There was no law. Law didn't permit it. Not even that. There was no law. There was no provision of law for having a separate Chamber of Commerce for women. But we fight, and we fight because our Constitution gives equal rights. And our Constitution also says that anything which can bring benefit to the woman, the state must give it. So I was forcing, and then government said, all right, 1 year. Said, so women has to prove themselves all the time. So any Chamber of Commerce, you go and you just get the license, but we had to prove every year we used to do the renewal. But on the journey also, we also found that, what women actually need. One of the things is that women need economic empowerment. Women also need to be a leader. And all of you know that leaders are not born. Mostly we think about it, but leaders are developed. So as I was doing training and building capacity of the women entrepreneurs and bringing policies for women entrepreneurs, because that is also very important. If we see anything inequality, and to make it equal, we need to have policies. And as women entrepreneurs are not getting bank loan because they don't have collateral, and mostly we women don't have assets in our name. So I lobbied to the government. And the first time, I think, in the world, there was a separate provision for women entrepreneurs to get 25 lakhs taka, Bangladeshi taka, to have bank loan without collateral. And 15% must be given by the commercial bank. And then we lobbied also to have a separate budget allocation for the development of women entrepreneurs. So we got it. So this is also, I want to say that, lobbying and also finding out the ways to bring more women into the basket is important. And then when I was doing that, I also tried to find out that we found so many businessmen into the parliament. Why not women there? And also, Why not in the union parishad or as a member or in the lowest tier of the politics? Everyone don't need to be a member of the parliament, but can be in the village or in their small town, can represent that. So I had a partnership with the Women's Democracy Network with Washington DC, and what I did, I came back, I took the training on leadership, and I came back, and again I trained 400 women entrepreneurs to run for office. But on that journey also, I found out that, yeah, I need to speak into the parliament to raise the voice for women entrepreneurs. This is not enough what I am doing now. And that's why um, try to find out which seat. And I found that in my seat, the present Awami League government, they didn't get after liberation. And I'm the only woman, elected woman of that province, and the first time I could get that seat for Awami League. So women can do it. I have never been into politics. I have never been into many things, but every day is the first time. And also one thing I learned, that if we want to be equal, we need economical empowerment. We need to earn money. Money talks. And when we have money, whatever the torture, whatever the harassment, whatever injustice we get, this can be shut down by having money. So and also lastly, I would like to say that as this is my happiness for being in the parliament, that in 17th November last year in the parliament, rapist, the ultimate punishment has been declared as a death penalty. Earlier it was for some years of jail. So I could be a part of that. So these are the things which we need to know, that in every step of life, a woman will fight, but they also need to have a strategy. That a goal changes, life changes. And that's why you need to change your strategy so that you can be equal. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think there are two points you made which really resonated with me. One thing, what you mentioned about political representation is something that needs to be there throughout the political structure and not only in parliament. Of course, parliament being the topmost body, it is really important that women are represented there. But I really, that the point that you made about, at all levels from grassroots onwards. And I link back to, one of the speakers who made a point yesterday saying that leadership is not just about the position that you hold, but leadership is also about the ability to execute, demonstrate leadership action. And in that sense, everybody can take that, responsibility or take the initiative to exercise leadership action. So I think really that point is very well made. The second point that you made, and which I thought was very important, is, and that's kind of the entire foundation of today's panel, is that the voice needs to be heard. If we are not there, who will hear our voice? And that kind of takes me to, Gayani, and to invite her to make her contribution about women in the transport and logistics sector. Much has been written, and preparing for this session, I was actually looking at some of the reports, and I came across an ILO report which said that there's a lot which people talk about in terms of women's safety in transport, women's access to transport, but not very much is said about women's presence in transport, women in transport and logistics jobs. Why are women invisible in this sector? Gayani, over to you.
Thank you, Deepa. I think it's a very pertinent question, and I'm really happy to answer that. So I'll just take few years down the line during my career, so that I can then relate to the answer to your question. So I as a kid, I'm the eldest of a family of 3, and I had 2 siblings, so brother and a sister. So from our childhood days, our parents didn't treat us any differently. because there was one boy in the family, 2 girls. So from our childhood days, our parents always inculcated in our minds that you have to educate yourself. Only through education you can reach leadership position. So we were very, very focused in whatever we did, whatever we undertook. So I was supposed to be a very good in maths, so therefore I went into engineering, again considered to be a very male dominant field. So in my batch in the university in Sri Lanka, out of 200, there were 222 girls only in the batch. So for me, the way we were brought up, plus the fact that I didn't have a differentiation being a male and a woman, so I didn't feel that I was in an area that it is not supposed to be done by women. So that's how we were brought up. So therefore, for me, gender was not that important for me. For me personally, whether I am able to or capable enough to do the job was what mattered to me was. So every time, whatever the opportunity that came my way, I actually took it up, so that, and I wanted to make sure that I do it to the best of my ability. I made sure that I am capable, I am educated enough, I am competent enough to handle that. So that actually helped me to get into these unconventional, so-called unconventional areas that are considered to be female unfriendly and male dominant. So after I finished my degree, I went overseas and came back to Sri Lanka. From UK, I came back to Sri Lanka and I joined a company. And then I worked there for a short period of time, and I applied for Unilever. So when I joined Unilever, I'm a food process engineer. So I went into, again, a technical area, again, full of men there. So the factories are full of men and hardly any females. So I was supposed to be the only woman at that time joining the area in the factory. So again, I was working, neck and neck with these men in the factory level. But I was very comfortable to work with this workforce members at the very lowest level, and I wanted to dirty my hands. I need to understand the pulse of the people. So I worked my way around, and I was sent overseas. And when I came back to Sri Lanka, at that time we had a foreigner expatriate as the supply chain director. He was saying, okay, Gani, why don't you move to supply chain? And that is how I moved to supply chain. That's why I want to start this story, otherwise it doesn't fit in. So again, another opportunity that came my way, being an engineer, working in a factory environment, working in R&D, quality assurance, heading factory operations, manufacturing, quality assurance, and all that. At Unilever, I was offered to come to supply chain. And I didn't know anything on supply chain because I've been a thoroughbred engineering graduate. And, I then said, okay, let me say. So I always thought if somebody is offering me something, that means they're the person maybe identifying some capability in me. So I really work my way around, work with clerical staff at the lowest level to understand ABC of the supply chain. And then every year I started getting promoted, logistics. I was given additional responsibility in procurement, logistics. And then after 6 years in the job, I was promoted to the director board in Unilever. And at that time, I was the first female director for supply chain in the entire South Asia. So I didn't realize again that I was trying to get into the job that has not been ever done by a female. So if you really look at the industry, Unilever being an organization which is very supportive of women, I had to really work hard to prove my mettle to the company that I was capable to go to that position. So it was very competitive to get in there. So when I reached that position, I realized why not many women are in the field, that is in supply chain. When I joined supply chain and when I moved as a director supply chain, we had only 15% women in our department. So after working for 6 years in the company as the director, I left the company and took early retirement to start my own consulting career. And when I left, there were 30% women. So Unilever had a diversity agenda, but then fact that the women who are joining the industry in the company saw that there was a woman at the top, and the fact that they realized an ordinary woman could achieve these so-called male-dominated industry, actually, I would say I paved the way for young women to get into the industry. So for me, I'm really happy because of that. So while I was there, what I did was I realized you need to not only what you created within the organization that you need have more women, but you need to also create this momentum outside the organization as well. So at that time, I was part of a chartered member of the Chartered Institute of Logistics at Transport, which is a global organization which is based in UK, present in 100 odd countries, 36 countries, which has a rich heritage of 101 years. So even in the industry, in the professional body, they didn't have women that much. So I pioneered and set up Women in Logistics and Transport with another lady, co-founded Women in Logistics and Transport Sri Lanka at that time in 2013. And since then, global, before that, few other countries also set up. So through that, Women in Logistics global movement was launched in 2013 when the international convention was held in Sri Lanka. So through that creation of awareness, we saw more women who didn't know the opportunities that existed in the logistics and transport sector. They started realizing the potential in the industry and they slowly started joining it. So through Women in Logistics and Transport, what we did was the women who are already having qualifications, even women who are willing to move into the industry, didn't know the opportunities that were available in the industry. So our first job was to create the awareness. Create the awareness on the opportunities, because our industries seem to be very macho, very hard work. You have to work 24/7, odd times of the day. You have very, environment is not very conducive for women. If you look at a port or airport or in trucks and, all that kind of thing is seen to be very rugged conditions. So we had to allay the fears of women and said, yes, you are very empathetic. You can deal with people. If you don't like to work in the operational area, there are other opportunities you have in supply chain and logistics where you can use your brain. You can use your other capabilities that you have to work. So we did a dipstick in the market, identify opportunities available, and then we created awareness. We went to universities, schools, and then created this awareness to educate everyone that there are opportunities that you have to join the industry. So through that, we created a huge movement in not only in Sri Lanka, in other countries as well, where globally now we have a huge critical mass in our industry. So when you look at our logistics and transport and supply chain, the whole works, it's a very diverse industry. I always say behind any product or a service or an event, there is a supply chain. If there is no supply chain, there is no life on this planet. So it is a very essential thing for the society. So we as women are nurturers. We always like to support each other. So we have that innate capability in us that can support the driving this supply chain. So we have to really inculcate that knowledge and the awareness among the women in our sector to create that excitement and motivation to join that. So we realize that through this awareness that we have created, not only through WILAT, there are other women's bodies in the sector now, have slowly now joined the bandwagon, and all of us are now together creating this awareness and mentoring opportunities and networking opportunities has made really getting more women to join the industry. So now there are universities offering degree programs, and even in universities, there are more women coming out of the universities. But the thing is, women always, before they even start the career, they put themselves on various barriers. So we need to understand how do you make them ready, because I always say, before we go and break the glass ceiling, we need to tackle the sticky floor. Because although you have more women coming out of the universities in Sri Lanka, their female labor force participation is only 35.6%. But universities, if you look at, women are doing really well. 60% of the graduates who are coming out of universities are women. And even primary and secondary is also the case. So why are these women are not getting into the industry, especially the so-called unconventional industries like logistics, transport, and supply chain, and other specific areas? So we have to understand these. So we are constantly looking at various initiatives to educate them, inspire them, mentor them, provide opportunities for internships, so that through that they will get to know and work under women, leaders, and that will actually inspire them to get into the industry. So at this stage, I'll stop at this. So it's again engagement, breaking the barriers, ensuring a critical mass is entering the industry, which is tackling the sticky flow. Because after a while, when women get married, then when they have kids, then again you have a leaking pipeline. Women are falling off that. So therefore, we need to first manage a critical mass getting to the industry, so that you can create that critical mass, so that more opportunities are getting created for women to go up. So that's what I have been propagating through Willat activities, and I'm also part of Women's Chamber through entrepreneurial activities also. So women entrepreneurship also, we work with different agencies to do that. So this is, at this stage, I'll stop it, but maybe later on we can ask questions later on. So in my books, I feel you should not get carried away that I'm a woman, therefore I am constrained, I should not go into this area. It is important for us to have female role models, so that they will be able to motivate and really educate and energize the young women getting into the industry, so that they will also able to get into the industry and make a difference to the society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gayani. I think it was so inspirational to hear you speak. You were speaking with such ease that, it seemed as if it was a very smooth journey, but, I guess at the end of the journey, you can look back and talk a little bit with ease about it, but I'm sure the journey itself would have been quite challenging for you. And thank you for sharing your those the years that you have, the journey that you have traveled. There was actually one thing which you said, which has struck me, where you said that, before you break the glass ceiling, pay attention to the sticky floor, and how do you overcome the inner kind of reservations which could hold you back. The other thing which you also said, where you were linking it to generating awareness about the industry, which you were saying in the context of the leaky pipeline, that there are women who are studying and coming out of colleges with qualifications, but somehow not entering the workforce, especially. And this is the same idea of leaky pipeline is we have also noticed, when we are talking about women in STEM careers, there are a lot of women studying STEM, but there aren't as many women doing STEM. Which, as Dr. Rohini Godbole, one a prominent scientist in India, had said in one of the interviews which I had seen. I think something which a leader like yourself brings is, I read somewhere saying that girls can't be what they can't see. So, being able to see women in positions of leadership, the so-called non-traditional positions of leadership, gives them the whole feeling that, yes, I can, if she could have done it, then perhaps this is something I can also do. So I think that's very important, the sort of impact that a role model can have. And that's where representation really, having someone in there, it's not just about being present, but being present and what you represent. That is also important. I'd just like to shift focus onto now, the intersectionality aspect of it. Not all women are, they're not a homogeneous group. Women, are a diverse group. They may be women, they may be not. Even when we're talking about gender, there are so many intersectionalities. Age is there. There is, the geographic location, class, caste, religion, these and ability. So I think that there is this whole idea of representation around. We have actually invited a very important speaker from a National Forum for Persons with Disabilities in Pakistan, Abia Akram. She's the chairperson, and who's done a lot of work around the whole issue of disability. I'd like to invite her to speak. Also, in her contribution to throw light on, what do you think that the whole idea of disability has somehow made invisible or cloaked the whole issue of women with disabilities. Over to you, Abia, for your contribution.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Diva. Thank you to British Council for organizing this very important panel today. Thanks to all the speakers. I'll just briefly talk about, especially in the context of current pandemic of the COVID-19, and how women and girls with disabilities are facing the discrimination in taking the leadership roles, not only in the disability sector, but also in the gender mainstream organizations and the gender movement overall. 10 to 15% of the total population are persons with disability, and 50% of them are women and girls with disability, and more than 80% are living in the rural areas. That's a huge number. And we have witnessed these women and girls with disabilities are completely confined at homes. They are not getting the basic rights like education, health or support, and also they are the first one who got sexually harassed or faced all the discrimination in their life, gender-based violence, psychosocial traumas. And if they are in the conflict and the disaster prone areas, then the discrimination increased a lot. What we did, we started the work with women with disabilities almost 2 decades now. We have been empowering and trying to include them in the mainstream society from the human rights perspective, because we thought once you give the leadership role of women with disability, make them visible, accept the diversity, then we can be able to give them more spaces where they can play their role. We know the families are really concerned because their mothers pray that our daughter die before we die, because nobody is going to take care of them. They are not educated, they don't have the employment opportunities, or they are not going to have their own families. So how we can expect them to do a development work or contribute in the country? So what we did, with the British Council initially, with some of the other partners, we identified those women and girls with disability all over the country who can accept their disabilities as a different lifestyle, and they feel proud of their disabilities as an identity, and they accept and talked about it, and they advocated for it. I love my disability because it's my identity. And now we have to enable the environment. It's not about saying if somebody is doing good job, they are the very exceptional case for us, and we are proud of them. It's all about enabling environment for everyone, because if you make the accessibility, the infrastructural changes, the attitudinal changes, the communication, or some deaf people, they cannot understand, so why you are not translating all the documents in the sign language? How we can provide them information in accessible formats? And at the same time, we have to make the changes in the laws and the policies, because that's the systematic change and the systematic barrier that exists everywhere at all levels. So once we go for the dialogue directly with women with disabilities, what kind of challenges they are facing, what kind of opportunities they have, and how they can contribute, and then we can see a positive change. During the COVID response, we also seen many women with disabilities facing the gender-based violence, because they are the one who always stay at home, but so-called non-disabled people were also staying back at home during the COVID situation, and it was so hard for them, and they were not able to have the safe space for themselves to talk about their concerns about the sexual health, reproductive rights, and all the violation they are facing. But we were very fortunate. During the 1 year, we also got approval of the Pakistan Disability Act, the first ever legislation on the rights of persons with disability. The act was approved. There were several councils were established. The Special Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disability under the Ministry of Human Rights and the Parliamentary Caucus, they have also established the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disability, which was very positive. And then we also got space there to talk about their rights, because once they are on the table, they will be able to talk about it. And now we have another move, the bill on the representation of women with disability in the parliament. We also, from the Pakistani context, we also work on the regional level. We work with the South Asia Disability Forum and establish that forum of women and girls with disability and engage them from the grassroots level to the South Asia level. And then on the Asia Pacific Forum, we have established for women and girls with disability. And now we are working on the Global Forum of Women with Disability, which will work under the generation equality. We also reference the sustainable development goals. That's the important one, because it has the political will. But if you have the clear indicators about the implementation plan, and if you have the visibility and engagement of women with disability, then you will be able to get the positive results out of it. We are also referencing to the Beijing 25 plus review platforms. The Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development is ongoing, it's happening, the CSOs Forum today. And in that platforms, we are trying to raise the voices of women with disability. Because if you have the proper allocations of the budget, if you have the proper policy reformation and the engagement of direct women and girls with disability, then you can see all the positive change. I know it's very slow and it's time taking, because every country have their own strategies, but how you are linking it towards the global and the regional and the grassroots level, and how you are engaging that directly voices of women with disability to a systematic and sustainable way. We work with British Council and developed this mobile application. It's called Equal Access. That was a tool which we are using to mobilize women and girls with disability to get the information. What are the legislations that exist in accessible formats, has where they can access this to that. We are also trying to make some of the visibilities through a comprehensive work plan for women and girls with disability, where we can see not only addressing the disability sector, but the mainstream sector needs to be involved and take the important role in it. How we can, collectively bring the change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abia, for for that what you have shared, and I think you made a very important connection with the need to have adequate policies in place at the at all levels. I mean, starting from the local to the the national, regional, and the global level. And the fact that of course the whole issue of disability needs special attention, particularly in the pandemic and the post-pandemic scenario. And I do believe that all this, the policy making will having a policy in place and ensuring that it is implemented in an efficient and effective way is a very crucial sort of a strategy and approach to address these very real problems. And the talk of policy actually kind of segues into what I wanted to ask Nishta. As a representative, Nishta is the Deputy Country Representative for UN Women in India, and she is also quite a strident voice on feminism, if you look at her Twitter handle. Nishta, if you could spend some time to help us understand, this whole idea of gender equality leadership from a policy perspective, especially when we are talking about organizations, international organizations, multilateral, bilateral, and UN agencies, what they have done and what they can do in the time to come. Nishta, over to you.
Thank you. Sorry, my apologies. I seem to be completely out of power at home, so do put your hands up if I'm patchy, if there's something, if switching off the camera is going to be a better option, if at all. Well, let me come straight to the question because I'm conscious of time. I think it's a pretty bundled question, so let me unbundle it first. I think the first part of the question really looked at what is the importance of leadership, what is the importance of having women at the helm of decision making. And the second part of your question really was, what are bilaterals and multilaterals and in that space, particularly doing from a policy perspective. So let me first address, and I think, the first part of the question, I have rather obvious things to say, so it wouldn't sound like insight that you've never heard before. I think even earlier in the conversation, we spoke about you don't believe what you don't see. So the essence of having role models for women to think and assume that this is a space that they could occupy and claim is a rather important point. But beyond just having role models, beyond creating a chain of linearity between women at the shop floor, at the mid-manager level, and at the senior level, is also the very, very important aspect of what women bring to leadership. And I think COVID is an excellent. I mean, I don't mean excellent in the way like I didn't mean COVID was excellent. I'm saying that maybe it was an excellent time in the history of mankind to. Sorry about that. It was an excellent time in the history of mankind humankind to look back and see what is the leadership that women brought onto the table. And very, very clearly, we know that countries that were governed by women took, if I may say, more empathetic, more complex, more integrated decisions. They were handled better. We also know that even in parliaments and even in the Parliament of Britain, where women presented, they didn't particularly present just a public healthcare crisis. The view of COVID as a public, not just as a fully fledged public healthcare crisis, but as a socio-economic crisis, as a political crisis, as a crisis of sometimes leadership, as a crisis of inequality. I think that perspective that women brought onto the table for me was outstanding, and it differentiated the intensity, the impact, and the intention with how countries responded. And I think that made all the difference on the ground on who was attended to, who was prioritized, how aspects of life.
Nishti, you're kind of patchy, fading in and out. Perhaps if you stopped your video and just spoke, it might be a little better. Nisha, are you able to hear us? Nisha, come in, Nisha. Are you able to hear us?
I'm able to hear you. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes. Could I suggest that you turn off your video so you get better bandwidth?
Well, actually, I'm on Wi-Fi right now, so it shouldn't be that much of a problem.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Want to see me? I'll go. I'm kidding.
No, not at all. Please continue.
So sorry, where was I? I seem to have lost the moment. So I think there are two aspects of having more women in leadership. One is what women bring to leadership itself, and how leadership and decision making is enriched both in times of crisis and otherwise. And the gamut of experiences that women bring from their own lives, which actually is the real representation of life itself. The other part is, you can't expect her, you can't go to a little girl and say, well, you can be the Prime Minister of India if she's never seen a woman who's the Prime Minister of India. And I think, fortunately, particularly belonging to a country that has had its moment far back in history, it's incredible that we have these examples. And these examples are really important. And when we speak to women and girls on the ground, when we ask them, what is it that really led you to inspire? They will talk about one or the other woman who's been in a position of decision making where they thought they could be in a position of decision making. And I think that's incredibly important, because if you look at just corporate India, which is a big engine of growth and a huge slice of contribution to GDP, almost 60% of the talent leak of the leak in the talent pipeline is at the mid-manager level. It is not at the shop floor level. It is not at the joining level. It is when women graduate or are not able to graduate to higher realms of power, because then what they have otherwise in their lives becomes more demanding and also sometimes becomes more rewarding. And I think to address that leakage in the talent pipeline, role models are incredibly important. And it is important that role models enable other people to come up, because and I think that's an important point that we often miss out, that just having a few women sparsely populated here and there in decision making is not going to make a woman feel that she can do it. It is about the role that women play. It is about the voice those that women yield. It's about having enough women there. So she has to see her community up there reading the roost for her to believe that this is going to be possible. Otherwise, most women do tend to think, well, there's something magical about this other woman who seems to be there, because she may not have had the same problems that we do. And so I think when we talk about leadership, we're talking about leadership as a community of women, not a woman, not a few women, but enough women for women to believe. From a policy perspective, now, this is a very honest conversation. If you ask me about the UN, I think it's high time that the UN is led by a woman SG. Despite, as one of the greatest advocates, and I think that's the point about gender, that across the globe, it still is one of the most talked about but underfunded agendas of the world. Particularly when we talk about gender equality, we've spent as the world a lot of time in, watering the leaves and starving the roots, as they would say. So, and I don't think any institution in the world is any better. They're all a part of the same. We're all a product of patriarchy, and we're all fighting our way through smashing it. So I think the UN has had its will have its moment sooner than later. For me, I am very proud to be associated, to be working in service of UN Women, which to me is more than a UN agency, because to me, UN Women is that moment, is that consciousness that entered the UN system to say that women cannot be looked at accidentally anymore. And women had to be looked at intentionally as leaders, as participators in public life, as people, and as polity. So to me, UN Women is that standalone commitment of the United Nations to ensure that women are not on the periphery. Women are not a part of the trickle-down theory, but women will be focused on intentionally as a part of the development agenda. Two, I think, yes, we are yet to see as many women leaders as one would want in an organization like the UN as a matter of policy. But the UN is, I think, gearing its way in terms of organizational policies to have women in terms of affirmative action. And I think that's an incredibly important point. We're trying as UN Women in the country to see if that policy can be pushed through the private sector, if that can be pushed by the government in how it procures. We worked very closely with the Ministry of Women and Child Development to launch the Buy with Responsibility, which is how do you intentionalize buying from women-owned, women-managed enterprises. And it was quite surprising that we realized that a lot of the private sector did not have that data. They didn't know they knew what they were buying from people. They didn't know whether they were buying from women. So that kind of data making is what's going to help policy eventually. First and foremost, from a policy perspective, is having that disaggregated data of who we hire, who we grow, who is on the shop floor, because we don't know that data, we don't know anything to make those decisions. Number two, I think I have great respect for mentor and buddy programs, but I do think we have to be bold about the agenda of affirmative hiring, of affirmative promotions, because you see, it's not a design setting, or it's not a default setting that women get left out in leadership or in places that are rewarding. This is actually, this is not default, this is design setting, because I don't think it would be possible for anybody to believe that 50% of the world doesn't have merit enough to sit in seats of leadership. This is because the world is designed to look at women, to look at men as leaders and not look at women as leaders. So in an environment like that, you and I can have conversations about merit, and leadership and making their way through. But for me, I'm very clear, merit is a conversation that happens between equals, between those who have equal opportunities. And today, I don't think we're talking about an environment where both have equal opportunities, leave alone being equally paid for the same opportunities. That's another battle altogether. So to me, I think we've got to be bold as the world, at the cost of upsetting a lot of people, to say that we are going to pursue the affirmative agenda action. And, in places like India, we have great evidence of how affirmative action has worked through the 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution, which brought in 33% reservation of women in grassroots politics. Today, we sit at a place where more than 19 states have more than 50% by choice, by merit, by free and fair elections. And that has brought in a cadre of 1.3 million women in grassroots politics. That's the largest number any country has across the globe. So we have to be able to look at our own history and say what has worked for us and what has not worked for us. And if something has so evidently worked for us, we must gather the courage to repeat, if I may say, that offense, because it's an offense to patriarchy. So we must have the ability to repeat that offense, because until and unless we have women in positions of decisions making, or decision making is going to be by an imbalanced set of people in terms of representation, we are going to have imbalanced decisions. It is very hard to distinguish the both. And it's also important for me to end by saying that when we say women, we must resist the tendency to talk about women like a monolithic group of people where every woman looks the same, feels the same. It's like one herd. No, it's not. Intersectionality is a long lens. We spoke about that earlier in this panel. And I do want to commend people who are looking at intersectionality, because representation does not just mean bringing more women in. It means bringing all kinds of women in, like we've had all kinds of men in it. And I think we must delve into those agendas before it's too late, because if you and I did nothing differently than we did yesterday, we're probably looking at gender equality at 2089. I don't think it's the reality that our children can afford, that particularly countries like India can afford. So hopefully conversations like these will be trendsetters and will set the base for a longer conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha. I think you've said it all, actually, and there's very little for me to say very more. But I mean, in the interest of time, I think there is one question which I would actually like to ask the other panelists. And you mentioned, this whole idea of a community of women, that there needs to be a community of women to push change and to bring about transformation, but we aren't there yet. So we are still, Gayani spoke about the critical mass. So this is actually my question for Honorable Member of Parliament Gayani, and also to Abia, is that as you are part of that critical mass now, but then do you think that shifts the pressure on you as to be the sort of trendsetter? And what do you think about that? Very quickly, if I could have very short, very quick inputs from you. We'll start with Saleem Ahmed, please.
Thank you. I shouldn't say it's a pressure, but I think you are motivated, and you are, when I see, like when I formed the Women's Chamber of Commerce, when I was finding that women entrepreneurs are not getting bank loan. So what we did, we had a coalition with 180 NGOs and 1,800 women entrepreneurs, and we made women's business agenda. That what is our agenda, and we find out into details. We placed it to the Home Minister, Finance Minister, Central Bank, and it was documented. So I think a group can do many things, but documentation also is very important. And then when we lobby, things really happen.
Thank you, ma'am. Gayani?
Yeah, I think I agree with her wholeheartedly. I think when you have even a smaller critical mass, it motivates you to do more. So when you have a group of women together, you can actually achieve bigger and higher levels in whatever you want to do in your specialization or a field. So you can get together, you can create the awareness, then the men folk also will start to notice you. Because what we did through Vilat in Sri Lanka, I think that create a lot of excitement, motivation, and awareness. And through that, the men started to notice us. That fact that I did all this with the community, and then in fact I got elected as the men's body's president also. So that means they recognize you. So you need to really show your colors, I would say, right? Then you have to be noticeable. Sometimes women are not happy to brag about themselves, talk about it, because we said, okay, if we are very good, people should notice us, but that doesn't work in the normal environment. So you need to really create awareness, talk about it, so that others will notice it, so that others will get more energized to join the movement and join the bandwagon. I think then men will start to notice it. So you create that. So you have to keep the energy momentum going until you achieve whatever you want to do, for our tribe, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to add that, when we are fighting, when women entrepreneurs are not having trade licensing, you're doing business for so many years, why you are not doing it? And found that because of corruption, they were not going and making to the bank or many institutions or the city corporation. So what we did, we formed advocacy group. So first a woman goes and she's not able to make it happen because bribery and things comes up. So next day that group goes. So group becomes much more stronger. So I think the formation of group in every level, I think is very important, and having a voice, a small leader who can represent, a leader like us too. So that is important. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And I think Bangladesh has shown the way on how to do this with the BRAC experiment, and really the models being replicated in other countries. Can I just quickly go over to Abia for concluding remarks? This whole idea of critical mass and building a community of women oriented towards leadership.
Yeah, I would say it's again a huge responsibility on you, but at the same time, setting the vision and the clear indicator where everyone is heading. It's not just achieving the small steps where you can see everyone is collectively agree with you, like what you are creating, the impact and how visible it is and how it's making the changes the lives of those women and who's taking the leadership role. So it's all the whole system, and it's not happening quickly, but you have to be struggle and a continuously way.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Nishta, any last, concluding remarks from you before we wind up the panel?
Well, none. I think I'm happy to have this conversation. I'm glad that very privileged to be invited by the British Council. So I think most of what he said has been said. But I do want to respond to your question on onus, because this is a question that I get asked a lot of times, which is, some of the most poorly performing states in terms of state assemblies are those with women chief ministers in terms of gender. So a lot of people have often asked me this question that, nothing changes when there's one woman at leadership. So do women have more onus to bring up women? Is that putting a lot of onus on women? I think so. But to be honest, the truth is, it's also a little absurd as a community and as a fraternity for us to expect that we're going to be able to put one woman there and she's going to make all that difference. So the conversation of critical mass becomes very, very important, because there are enough women, there are enough voices, and then that becomes not a moment in history, but a movement. And I think that transition is important for seeing more women. So yes, do women have more onus? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, it depends really on them. But can we pin onus once we have enough women into that conversation? I think that's a resounding yes. So for me, that's the difference. And also, let's be honest, yes, we can keep saying whether women have more onus than men, but this is a conversation that's not, we keep saying that gender equality is beneficial to all. Yes, it is in the long term, but in the short term, it really is about the redistribution of power. and that's not a pleasant process. So nothing that's pleasant is very voluntarily engaged in, unless and until you have an outstanding man on the other side who thinks this is the right thing to do, which is actually a difficult place to be if you have the power. So conversations like this on critical mass are important, and I hope we sustain the momentum as a fraternity.
Thank you so much. I couldn't have said it better. I mean, the whole idea of a critical mass where you have enough women there who can take this forward, and not just enough women, but enough diversity of that critical mass is also important, so that the differences are recognized, and whatever transformation happens is based on those diversities and those differences. And in that way, it is, I think, more inclusive also. I think it's been a great panel. We could talk, for much longer than this. But we've got other panels coming up, so I would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you. Honorable Member of Parliament Saleema Ahmed, Nishta, Gayani, and Abia for taking time and sharing your thoughts. It's been a great way to start the second day of proceedings for this summit. Thank you very much, and over to you, Pooja.
Thank you so much, Ms. Saleema, Ms. Gayani, Ms. Abia, and Ms. Nishtha, for sharing your experiences with us and for being a leader and inspiration for many girls and women across the world. Thank you, Deepa, for that superb moderation of the session. Next up, we have a very interesting and pertinent workshop with its focus on women in STEM forging ahead. And I'd request Deepa to take it forward from here.
Thanks very much, Pooja. So we are now moving into this workshop on women in STEM forging ahead, and it was mentioned briefly in the previous panel also, this whole idea of a leaky pipeline. So so we thought that this is something that definitely needs to be spoken about. Especially the pandemic has shown the importance of digital technology and the importance of technology for us to remain connected as a humanity, and also make digital technology work for the benefit of humanity. But I think one of the issues that whenever we speak of gender equality in the context of STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is the underrepresentation of women, and perhaps invisibility. From speaking from an Indian perspective, definitely, I think everyone would agree that India has made a lot of progress as far as getting more women into higher education. But somehow it is not translating into getting women into science careers. So we thought, why not have this as as a point of discussion, and talk to women in STEM themselves, who've been there, who walked the journey, and who'll be able to tell us how it went and what happened to it. So I'm very pleased to introduce the two speakers at this session. We have Professor Arpita Mondal. She is the Assistant Professor in the Department of Civil Engineering and IDP in Climate Studies at IIT Bombay. And she is also an Associate Faculty Member in the Interdisciplinary Program in Climate Studies and at IIT Bombay. Her research focuses on hydroclimatic extremes. She has received many accolades, such as the Asian University Alliance Scholars Award, and as a PhD student, she received the Endeavour Research Fellowship from the Government of Australia and a Fulbright Nehru Research Fellowship at UCF, the Berkner Travel Grant of the American Geophysical Union, AGU. We also have a second speaker, Sumedha Limai, who represents the corporate side of things, where Arpita represents the academic side of things. Sumedha has substantial experience of almost 2.5 decades in the industry experience across companies like Intel, Texas Instruments, CMC, and ST. She's currently leading development programs for next-gen server SoC, networking SoC, and 5G ASICs from Intel India. Her experience ranges from building and leading teams to developing differentiated products spanning across SoCs, digital IPs, CAD, EDA, design flows, and process initiatives. She has led Intel India's diversity and inclusion initiatives, and also led the TI India Gender Diversity Forum for multiple years, and has driven multiple other key initiatives within the organization. So we are very fortunate to have such an eminent speakers for the panel. So what I would like to do is to start with Professor Arpita and invite her to make a contribution. And over to you, Professor Arpita.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Deepa, and it's absolutely my pleasure to be joining this panel today. Thanks to Deepa and Yamini and the British Council for inviting me, and I'm very glad to be sharing the stage with Sumedha, who's had great experiences as in the leadership role in Intel and Texas Instruments prior to that. I would be sharing some slides just to give an overview of what I do and what my thoughts on STEM are. So is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes, of course, please go ahead.
Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes.
So my name is Arpita, and I work primarily in the Department of Civil two other interdisciplinary programs. One is IDP in climate studies, and the other is urban science engineering, which is listed here because I joined fairly recently. Civil engineering means all about, building buildings or roads and bridges, whereas what I do is, a little difficult to appreciate perhaps by the general public. So what I study is water resources, more specifically hydrology and how that links with climate change. Hydrology, loosely put, would be the science of what happens to rain when it falls on the ground. And I'm also a part of the interdisciplinary program in climate studies, which initially started with a large seed grant funded by the Department of Science and Technology. Now it has developed into an interdisciplinary program. The uniqueness about this program is that it's a PhD program, and we give PhD degrees. This is the first doctoral program in India which is targeted towards climate change. And the degrees are, so the student is jointly mentored by two faculty members, two from different academic units. And the idea for that is to ensure that there is interdisciplinarity in the research that we do. Just to give you some idea about the geographical as well as the gender diversity in my group, although I have not consciously ensured this, but I'm lucky to have maintained a very good ratio between the genders in my research group. And among my collaborators also, as you can see here, not only are quite a few of them female researchers, but I also want to emphasize here the fact that they are from different disciplines and of course from different geographical regions of the world also. Why I mentioned here that is because, we always look at gender as an equity or a social justice issue, whereas, it's natural to ask, is it necessarily bad? Is it necessarily bad that women are thought to be better fit towards, roles of caregivers, something like that? And, there have been categorical studies, studies which prove that diversity allows us to question the status quo, and as a result of that questioning the status quo essentially serves as the bedrock of science. So it's not only a question of social justice, it's also a question of improving the science that we do. I do have some data. I'll tell you a little bit about the campus. So where we are in the very attractive city of Bombay, Mumbai, as we would call it. So this is our campus. We have a lake, which is bordering a campus. Part of the campus includes the lake. We also have another lake on the other side of the campus, the Vihar Lake. So the Vihar Lake, two lakes which surround our beautiful campus. Birds that you see here are found on the campus. So I've images from my husband's album. And we do have a couple of interesting predators. So we have a crocodile that you can see here, which is in the Powai Lake. And this is a green vine snake, which is seen hanging from one of the trees here. Okay, now coming to the role of women in engineering or STEM in general, we see that there has been no study focusing on women academics in engineering in India. We do have some data sets on the number of women enrolling in different branches of engineering. And as you can see from here, the numbers are not at all encouraging. I personally studied BTech in civil engineering from Jadavpur University in Kolkata, and I was one girls out of 100 students. Then I joined for my master's. I was probably, the ratio was a tad bit better. It was probably 30% or so of women and rest male students. When I joined PhD, the ratio was actually, but the question of, and even when I was a student, I never really understood the importance of this particular topic. I never really understood what the leaky pipeline means till I joined the job. And that's when I realized how serious a problem this is. And there are quite a few of us, there were women who did finish their PhDs with me and never chose a career in academics or any career for that matter. So just to give you some idea of how bad it really is, the figure that you see at the top is the percentages. This is a generic figure across the US. So as you see, the higher you go up in the, the power hierarchy, or fellowships, or fellows of academies, full professors. In EU, the lower bottom left figure is Union. Again, the same. I'd like to focus on the fact that IIT Bombay is a 60-year-old organization, and we had our first dean only this year, the first female dean only this year. So it took 60 years for us to have the first female dean. We have never had a female director. None of the IITs has had a female director so far. So what's interesting is there is a serious attrition, and this essentially is what of the leaky pipeline is. I'm going to show some results, which was the material that I'm showing here has been very kindly shared with me by two of my mentors. One of them is Professor Chandra Venkatraman, who is at IIT Bombay, and the other one is Dr. Bidhi Shaghosh. She was my senior in my college, Jadavpur. She is now a faculty in Trinity College in Dublin. And this particular research output is from a study taken by Professor Rohini Godbole from IISc. And this was a survey. It's not an academic result. It's not a published result. So that's why I show here as a part of the lecture she gave here. 60% was family reason, but 40% could be attributed to, sorry about that. So 40% could be attributed to other factors, particularly organizational factors, and that's where I think that's where institutions such as employers can play a role. So excuse me. There's of course the myth of meritocracy. Women are excuse me, not meritable enough, and Nishtha spoke a lot about the invalidity of meritocracy when there is no equality. There's of course the perception that engineering is not for women. So I was one among the 14 students who chose 14 female students out of 100 who chose civil engineering. In mechanical engineering, there were only 2 girls out of the 100 students. So those are the kind of prejudices that we need to target to break. We would need unbiased selections. I've seen time and again questions posed for faculty female applicants. Questions such as, what's your personal plan? Where do you marry? Where do you plan to settle down? Whereas such questions are never asked to the male applicants. We need coaching, we need sponsors, we need mentors, we need integration, and of course, we need societal appreciation. And just to end with some thoughts, someone told me when I had just joined here at IIT Bombay that if you are doing something which you are passionate about, and if you're not able to give time to other things, you are not being selfish. And that sort of helped me, because we have been conditioned so much from the childhood. As a colleague puts it jokingly, that in India, you should first become a good daughter, then become a good wife, a good mother, a good daughter-in-law. And after that, if you have to become an Einstein, yeah, sure, go ahead. Who's stopping you? So, that's our culture. And to break that, to believe that you're doing something and you're not being selfish in doing that was important for me to know. The other thing which I would like to tell all of my students and all the young girls out here is that do not negotiate on financial independence. It's something that's completely non-negotiable. Some other key points: you are not alone. There are so many of us who are struggling, and we need to pull each other out. All of us need to uplift each other, and we need to do this together. The fourth point I would like to mention is it's not a sin to ask for help. Get as much help as possible. Outsource the if that's what it takes to allow you to do what you want to do. And lastly, you have to set yourself realistic expectations. I remember when the Chandrayaan mission was successful, the BBC had written a good story on the ladies who were at the helm of it, and they were interviewed about how good they were at managing both the house, the home, the family, as well as their careers. And I would like to say that do not set yourself unrealistic expectations, because at the end of the day, you have 24 hours, and it's okay to be good at something and not so good at other things. It's okay to be that. That's my message to all my students and all the young girls out here. In terms of institutional measures, of course, we need some concrete measures. We need, for example, now the institute realized for a feeding room or daycare centers. How to possibly the raw material that we get from underrepresented communities are not good enough, but can we mentor them and let them bring their applications up to a certain level? Can we remove the biases, and what can be formalized mechanisms for mentoring? So these are some institutional measures, and I'm going to stop here. Thank you for your time. I'll pass on the baton to Sumedha and let her share some thoughts that she might have had through her journey, and also tell us some of the institutional measures that Intel has been taking. So thank you.
Thank you, Arpita. Thank you so much. As you said, I mean, it was very interesting to hear, the practical tips that you have shared. And so I won't spend more time talking. I think we'll hand it over to Sumedha to please share her experience, especially from a corporate perspective. Over to you, Sumedha.
I cannot hear you, Sumedha. Can you hear her, Deepa?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can
hi.
hear you.
Yes, yes.
About that. Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My pleasure to be here. I've been listening to some of the conversations and absolutely very, very energizing. So good to be part of this forum. A little bit about myself. I have been introduced with a lot of adjectives, but really what I want to share here is that I come from a small city called Gwalior. And Arpita just talked about how engineering is not considered to be like a women's profession. And I can say that one of the reasons why I am where I am is because my parents, especially my dad, had no such thought in his mind at all, right? So just an interesting anecdote. When I was doing my 12th board, he actually got all the forms for all the engineering colleges in India that he could lay his hands on, and he asked me to apply to all of them. And he even got this, there's a mining school at Dhanbad, right? So he got that form. And I read the form and I told him, this is a mining college, women are not allowed. And he was like really furious, how can they do this, right? So I'm lucky enough to be having parents who absolutely had no sense of bias in that mind. I mean, it never occurred to them, that they, so, only later I realized how fortunate I am. And in fact, when I was filling my IIT form, at that time, you had to get signatures from your school. And in school, my my teacher said that, why are you filling all these forms? Anyways, you won't be allowed to go into a hostel and study, right? And I told him, you don't know my dad, right? So I think the message there is we can't change societies that easily, or countries or policies maybe, but we can definitely change our homes, right? And I really feel as parents, how we treat our daughters, how much respect we give our daughters, and how we nurture their hopes and dreams, and basically have a home which is free of bias. That's the best gift that you can give to your child, right? Both the boy and the girl, right? And that is really, it's a very simple thing to do. It's not a very eclectic, sophisticated thing. It actually is very simple to do. So I would really want to pass on that message. Let me share a few slides. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on slides. I really want to have the conversation. But let me, how do I? Tell me if you can see this. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. So actually, a while back, I did this small kind of story around how I've grown up and the kind of things I hold dear. And one of the things that I see, which all of you will relate to, is this statement from Darwin, which says that it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones that are most responsive to change, basically the species that can adapt themselves. And this is where I personally believe women score. I believe that women are really, really good at adapting. I mean, if I see around myself, I see women have absolutely no trouble adapting to a different place, different society, different home. It just comes very naturally somehow. And that's a strength that we carry with ourselves. One important element of really being able to hold on your own and be able to drive yourselves in your life, whichever way, whatever choices you make in your life, is the sense of being alive, right? And the sense of having that energy with yourselves. And a lot of times we find that we actually run out of energy. There are so many demands that are made on us, and Arpita described, like in the end, she was talking about how you're expected to be a good daughter, good wife, good sister, and then after doing all that, if you still have energy left, maybe you can have a career, right? I mean, and that's unfortunately the reality. And what I found over my career journey is that whenever I have failed to invest in myself and my sense of aliveness, I have actually really got burnt out, right? I mean, I had to take a short break because my health suffered. I wasn't really paying attention to myself. I was trying to do everything else. And that's a priority that we all need to learn to have and manage. That can mean different things to different people. It can mean having a hobby. It can mean doing meditation or yoga or talking to your friends or whatever it is that makes you happy. And the most important duty that you have in any journey that you take up is this sense of energy and aliveness. And if you find that it is getting compromised, then you really need to re-examine your choices and try to change your life in some way, right? It can be a personal change or it can be a professional change. And whenever I have felt low on energy, I've always looked at it and made a change, right? So that's one message I want to convey. The other thing, of course, this is very cliched, is about knowing yourselves, right? So what works for someone else may not work for me. What works for me may not work for you. So spending time in understanding, what is it that I really want? What is my temperament like? What kind of simple things, what kind of routine suits me? What kind of exercise suits me, right? I mean, these are all things that I have seen. It took me time to understand myself. And the more I understood myself, the easier life became, the easier I found to relate. I found my ability to relate to other people improved as I learned about myself, right? So it can be reading books, it can be conversations, introspection, whatever, right? But that's a real important investment of time, I would say. I can see a few hands being raised. Can I take questions through this, or how do you want to do this? Deepa?
So if you'd like, if your message is done, then yes, we can move on to the questions.
Oh, okay. No, I'll just wrap up maybe in 5 minutes and I'll take questions, Deepa. Yeah.
Sure, please go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, okay. The other aspect, which again I find is something like a lighthouse value for me, is courage. I really feel that unless we have the courage, we are not able to practice other values in life. And for a woman, courage is needed at every step of the way. I have friends who have more difficult personal situations than I have. And I have seen them really navigating life's choices with utmost courage. And that really defines a leader, right? And true leadership is really all about courage. It can be seemingly simple, but really hard choices like finding your marriage partner. I tell women who join Intel or who join the industry that the most important choice that you'll ever make is your choice of a life partner. That is if you want to marry. I mean, if you don't want to marry, that is also good. And if you do want to marry, then you really have to be careful about, you have to find a person who respects you and your choices and gives you the space, because making a wrong choice there can lead you in more difficulties. You can still be successful. It will take more effort. I can relate an incident, right? So my parents actually picked a person for me, and I just didn't feel that he was the right person. And I actually conducted a small experiment. I changed my job and I told him about it. He just freaked out and said, how could you do it without talking to me? And I said, okay, this is not the right person for me, right? So you can conduct your own tests, right? But my point is that be very selfish about your life and have the courage to really follow your convictions and your choices, right? And that's harder than it seems, right? And the same applies in career. You have to take courageous choices, otherwise things don't work out well. The other thing that Arpita touched upon as well is finding help. So get as much help as possible from your parents, your in-laws, your community, your friends, your domestic help, wherever, right? And of course, it's a give and take. So you have to give help as well. This is something sometimes we find it difficult to do, but it's been absolutely invaluable. Whenever I had a big challenge in life, it was this network that really supported me and pulled me through. So that's something to invest in, right? From the day you become conscious about it. The last one again is finding inspiration, right? A lot of times we find we get so overwhelmed with life and all the little things that we have to take care of. We don't spend time in reading something that uplifts us, in listening to something that really brings in inspiration. Like this session is inspiring to me. And that's again, something all of us need to do. Women especially need inspiration because they need a lot more energy to kind of carry out everything that they have to in their lives. So that's a little bit on myself. I'll wanted to continue on this statement, right? And this is something that has given me some sense of balance. I am a person who always wants to change things. I fight for fairness, and a lot of the initiatives I've led at work have led me to different difficult political situations. And there are times that I have let go, and I have learned this the hard way, right? So this is one prayer that I remind myself of every day is there are things that I can change, and I should always have the courage to change them. And there are also things that I cannot change, and I need to accept them, and I need the wisdom to know the difference. So that's really something to remind ourselves so that we don't really go off the other deep end where we burn out and really damage ourselves, right? So that's just something I really hold close to my heart. That is the end of my personal sharing. I have a little more on like what Intel does in terms of gender, kind of encouraging women in terms of leadership, and the kind of mentoring platforms it offers, the kind of interventions that Intel does in terms of promotions, right? So one of the primary reasons I could get into Intel, I can tell you, is because even after working for 20 years at TI, when I started interviewing, I got a lot of questions from seemingly very eclectic organizations about, can I work weekends? Can I really handle large organizations? How is my situation at home? And, how many kids I have, and, so on and so forth. Intel was the only place that didn't ask any of those embarrassing questions. So I joined Intel. And I actually worked on a lot of initiatives related to diversity. Really gave me a lot of insight and exposure. This leaky pipeline that Arpita shared, I have a kind of a different graphic on it, but the message is the same. You see a lot of gap between the 1,000 women who start and end, like you can say maybe 129 who reach senior positions, right? So a lot of leak happens. And the one that organizations can really do something about is once a woman joins the workforce, even after that, there's almost a 50% leak, right? And what do we do about it? A couple of things that really Intel does is offer programs like Home to Office and Boomerang, which are programs to attract women back. So there is definitely a little more special treatment that we need to provide to make sure that women have an easier path when they want to come back to work. Home to Office is open to all women. Boomerang is mainly for women employees who left Intel at any point in time and if they want to come back. Other than these two, the thing that I find very useful is that they intervene at promotions, right? So at promotions, they look at gender data and they really question why the women percentage is lower than the male, and they actually look at women who are eligible for promotions and they ask manager hard questions on why those women are not promoted. More often than not, we find that women don't ask for promotions and managers come under pressure. They offer the limited promotion quota that they have to the men because men are screaming for it, and sometimes they fail to actually promote deserving women. When they are asked hard questions, they go back, look at the data, and sometimes correct, and that has gone a long way in improving the gender quotient at Intel. It has gone up from 22 to 26% now, I think close to 27. Women in leadership positions have gone up from about 7% to 10%, right? And all these measures, they work. There's no quota system as such, right? But there's a very active scrutiny of the kind of decisions we take. There's very active effort at making sure there are women in panels when we are hiring, that for every big rec that opens, you really consider women candidates, right? So really small practical measures, a lot of coaching and training to managers on biases, etc., right? And Intel of late has also started to lead industry initiative on women advancement and inclusion. It's called Being Wise. It's led by Nivruti, who's our country head. And it is an Intel initiative, but really a consortium of organizations and also a partnership with government and academia to kind of create a framework that helps women advancement and inclusion, right? So those are some of the measures. And we also do a lot of work on STEM students, helping students through colleges and schools. It's part of our CSR initiatives as well as our Women at Intel initiatives, right? So I'm active at all of these, find it very enriching and uplifting to really participate in these initiatives, and they've been quite successful. Let me stop here and we can have a dialogue, questions, etc.
Thank you very much, Sumedha. I mean, and for that, really the ease with which you spoke almost made it sound like it was so easy. And I'm pretty certain it was not. I mean, with hindsight, I think one feels a little relaxed, but, and I said it in this panel also, but if you have to go through that time the mindset will be a little different, which is why, having the opportunity to listen to you, to listen to Arpita, will help people who are emerging, in the STEM careers, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and you should not give up I don't want to call it a fight, but you should not give up the effort, and keep going. I have a couple of questions, and there are some questions in the question box also. I think there's one about, I think one question is that why is it that women tend to drop out of STEM careers? So they may go through STEM education, but why does it not translate into STEM careers? And, Sumedha, you mentioned the industry academic linkages. Is there something in that, some effort in that, which could help make this transition from a STEM education to a STEM career? I mean, to both of.
Yeah, Arpita, you want to start? I can add if you want to.
I think I can talk a little bit on the reasons of dropping out, and the results of the survey that was conducted by Professor Rohini Godbole, the survey shows that about 60% of the reason is family reasons, which can range from anything such as, husband not willing to relocate, or family refusing to let the woman in the family be in a certain position. The other 40%, so those are the 60% is a little difficult to address, and that will take a little more time. When possibly all of us begin changes in our homes, and then as a society our mindset will change, and that will take a little more time. The 40% factors were institutional reasons and lack of institutional support, and that is where I think we can immediately take some actions. Some examples, I know IIT Bombay is now actively seeking to bridge the gap, not only for women but underrepresented communities in general. Like, for example, we are at some point, of course, the pandemic kind of ruined all the plans which were beginning to shape up, but there were plans of providing support, for example, in terms of communication, institutes vehicles allowing women to seamlessly go from one part of the city to the other, providing feeding centers, providing daycares. So those were all some examples of institutional measures. About the industry academia interactions, I'm not aware of any particular effort by IIT Bombay right now. If you have something to share, Sumedha?
Yeah, so yeah, thanks, Arpita. I'm unmuted, right? Yeah. Yeah. So yes, there are measures like fellowships and scholarships and so on, right? Intel India also has those. However, I would say that this particular dropout issue, right, of women completing their education but not pursuing, right, their career either in academia or in industry, it's actually very much related to families, societies, and a woman's own ability to stand up at the right time. Because it is very deeply actually linked, like I said before, to the person that you marry and the family that you marry into. And if you make the wrong choice there, it is very hard. I mean, I wouldn't even call it a wrong choice, right? I mean, right and wrong are relative things, but let's say that you do want to pursue a career, and then you get married into a family that doesn't respect that choice, then it is very hard, right? And I tell women that they should explicitly ask this question, right? And they should really decide based on the answer that they get, and they should really test the answer a little more instead of just getting a comfortable answer. And what happens is, like, for example, I'll take my example, right? When I got married, my husband was like 6 years, he's almost 6 years older to me. He had come back from the US and he was earning, I think he was earning 8 times my salary at that time, right? And me working, and of course I had working hours that were as demanding as him, right? I would work late hours, so obviously the quality of life at home was pretty poor because I was, working. He had to help me quite a lot, and my mother-in-law, my in-laws, but they never ever said that you don't need to work, he earns so much, why don't you just quit, we can all live happily. There was not even a thought, right? So I think working, it's like marriage, you should eliminate any question about whether I need to work or not. Only then you can work. If you ask that question every day, should I work? Maybe, if I don't pay the maid, then maybe my salary, if you keep calculating, you can't make it. Similarly, in a marriage, every day, if you start calculating whether this person is right for me, it's very hard to get the marriage going, right? It requires a certain absolute commitment. And the same applies to work. I think working, financial independence, like Arpita said, is the cornerstone. A woman needs it, and over a period of time you will find that it makes such a big difference to your life, right? You are included in family's decision making, your children respect you, over a period of time, relatives and family who probably initially, maybe the extended family, didn't quite appreciate, they will start appreciating you. It will happen with time, right? But there has to be enough support, especially from your spouse, to allow that time. And if that, in fact, there are times when I have thought that I need to quit, right? When my kids were small and my mother-in-law was not well for a long time, I told my family maybe I should quit, and they told me, no, don't do that, right? These are small intervals of time, they will pass. We are all there to support you. So that is crucial. That choice is crucial. Organizations can do a lot as well, especially when a woman comes back from maternity. I find organization tries to make good, well-meaning managers try to make choices for the lady, right? Oh, she's, having a small kid, maybe she doesn't want this responsibility. I don't think she can travel, her kids are small. Well, why don't you ask her, right? Maybe she has a way to travel, maybe she wants to attend that conference, right? Don't try to make choices for her, right? So these kind of trainings, because most of our managers also come from very traditional families, they don't know how to treat women, right? Or how to treat women in a very fair way. They from their side try to do the right things and try to take care of them, but that is not always the right thing to do. So Intel invests a lot in training managers, in just recognizing your own biases, unconscious biases, how to deal with them. I think all these small things help. Basically, treating a woman with respect and significance helps. Right? So.
Just one small joking thought in jest.
Sure.
So again, this is purely in jest. Okay. So a colleague of mine nicely put it. Men wants to protect her, whereas all we want is equal rights.
Exactly. That's true. Yeah. I mean, it is all well-meaning, right? But it kind of hurts. And I see that in childhood also, right?
Yeah.
We become, a lot of families are very protective of girls. They might be very loving, but that takes out the independence, right? So, yeah. So, Deepa, I think those are the thoughts we have.
Yes, I think those are really, really very interesting thoughts indeed, and very so real life. I mean, this is something which I think any person can identify with, this balancing work and career, especially if you are, a woman in a generally conservative / patriarchal society. Actually, there was a question from one of the audience who wanted to know that have you ever had to, as a woman in a STEM position or in a STEM career, either in academia or in the corporate sector, have had to face negative, energy or negative feelings from your co-workers or from superiors, juniors in the organization, and how did you handle that situation? Just to put it into a little more context, is when we run a few scholarships for girls, for women in STEM, and some of them spoke, when we went back to them after they finished their education and went into work, into professional life, spoke about an imposter syndrome. That maybe I don't deserve to be here. Maybe I am taking a position which a man might have otherwise filled. So feeling a little guilty to be there. So, how do you manage it if you they may say it to you, they may not say it to you, that may be verbal, non-verbal, but under such circumstances, how do you react? How do you manage your own emotions in such cases?
Yeah, maybe I can take that. I have a few thoughts around it, right? Especially around the imposter syndrome and about basically feeling excluded, right? I mean, in some sense, being given this feeling that you are not really deserving of whatever you're doing, right? And in fact, what happens is some of these diversity related initiatives, they create sometimes in women's mind, they point at them saying, because of these, people are questioning our ability, right? And they are thinking we are here because of these initiatives. So there are different layers to it, right? Couple of things I would like to say, right? I mean, first of all, one of the basic problems in our society is that men and women don't know each other. They are not friends. And you don't know men as friends. Men are, just as human as you are. They have their own set of problems and issues and fears and insecurities. Men may look very confident in a public setting if you don't know them. By the way, everyone looks confident. I mean, here we are talking, everyone looks very confident and very articulate. Of course, we all have our own private hell and we all have our fears and insecurities. All of us have it, right? It's very human to have them, right? For me, what has helped is actually knowing men. and making really good friends with men, because then a lot of this myth around, what men can do, what I can't do, what I can do, all that starts disappearing when you have a very level relationship with men. And not just my husband, but I have a wider set of friends who are all very open, right? I mean, they're very, very open. So you need to go out there and talk to men at equal level, at equal footing, right? And you need to talk to everyone, by the way, in life at equal footing, and it should be irrespective of designations, etc., right? Once you do that, you have that dialogue, you realize that you are human, right? I mean, much more than this man woman debate, we are all human beings, right? And we have our own set of fears and insecurities to deal with, and it has not got much to do with being a woman, at least in my mind. That is how I see it, and that's the best way that I have found to deal with it. Of course, there's a certain traits that I carry as a woman. Some of them help me, some of them don't help me. Maybe I cry a little more, maybe I'm angry a little less, but in the end, tears and anger, they are all both signs of losing control and emotional, problems overpowering us, right? So we need to tell people that tears and anger are the same. If a guy is shouting in a meeting room, and if women breaks in tears, please treat them as the same. Tears are not a sign of weakness. So there are these all small things, right? All of us have heard them, but we ourselves need to understand and put ourselves as par. If we can't respect ourselves, it's very unlikely that we can tackle all these things. And like I said before, knowing men, right? Knowing men as friends, I think is very critical part of this journey.
Thank you. I think.
Can I add one small point to that
Yes,
answer?
please.
Yeah.
I think even if you experience comments or behavior which is in some sense discriminatory, I think being true to oneself is helpful. I mean, what I meant was, I mean, if I am, let's say, a person who usually don't take comments which are discriminatory in nature, I would not tolerate it just because a colleague is saying it. I mean, if I were to raise my voice against a comment made by my brother, I would raise my voice against my colleague making that same comment too. I'll give you an example. So there's a couple colleague of mine, and they were once eating in the restaurant, and a senior male colleague sees them and says, "Oh, you're here because X did not cook today," where X refers to the woman. And the woman said, "No, I am here. We are here because Y did not cook today because it was his turn to cook today." So just
Yeah.
say be true to yourself. I mean, there's no point in trying to be nice or hide
Right.
your emotions when it comes to that.
Yeah. And it's an ongoing battle, right? It's not something that will ever go away, right? I mean, this is not to deny that that problem doesn't exist, right? But the only way to do it is to be like Arpita is saying, be very honest, be very courageous, right? Be out there, right? Without hurting anyone, just state as it is, right? And over a period of time, it helps you. In some cases, you don't, some people don't change their opinion, and that's okay. There are always a few exceptions, right? So, yeah.
So I have a question which is a little bit more, on a professional front. The whole, in the previous session we had, the panelists were talking about building communities of women, so that transformation can be built into design, is done by design and not default. So I wanted to, since the science and the STEM field is much more structured, I just wanted to get an understanding of, what role do networks play supporting women in science careers, or and do we have enough of, I know they are there in other countries, but do we have enough networks of women in science, women in STEM fields, and what role do they play, and what role can they play? It's open to both of you.
Sure.
Would you
You
like
to go first, Arpita?
You go first.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of organizations, right? I mean, there is this whole Grace Hopper's conference. There is Society for Women Engineers. IEEE has several chapters, like, looking at women. So almost every conference that you have today in India has like a section devoted to women in technology. We have ran like exclusive conference for women called Wintecon, that was in our semiconductor field, that were really encouraged papers written where the primary author is a woman, right? So there are lots and lots of initiatives, and there, of course, many of them are quite influential in the sense that they do encourage women to come out there, provide opportunities, provide a platform, provide visibility, etc. Right? These are very formal networks in some sense. I think what is more difficult to break into is informal networks and power networks. And I face, I mean, I'll be be very truthful here, right? I mean, I face that today, right? I mean, how do I get into the next level? It's very hard for me because there is no charted path, right? I mean, there's no telling how do I go about, right? And it is all said and done, it is easier to connect to senior women than senior men, right? And luckily, Intel has quite a few senior women. There are senior vice presidents and vice presidents who are women, right? So I try to understand how they, operate and so on. Like, so those tips, if you can get from senior women, I think they are very valuable in terms of how you should network, how you should find what to work on. Like in an organization, there are things that you need to work on in order to advance in your career, what kind of assignments you. So those are all very informal things which no amount of formal mentoring helps, even though there are a lot of formal mentoring structures. And the more you can find someone who with whom you have the right chemistry, it is easier. But yeah, I mean, as such, there are quite a few, pretty active organizations where you can start, you can find a peer group, and you can get connected.
Yeah, I agree. In academia too, we do have networks definitely play an important role. There's no denying that. And in academia, like Sumedha said, there can be both formal as well as informal networks. Informal networks might include having on board as your co-PI a female colleague vis-a-vis a male colleague, and that happens a little rarely. I I think it will all automatically improve the more we see more women in these roles.
Yes.
So it will automatically improve. The other part is, of course, in conferences we have women who are, I mean, the sessions which are consciously being designed to be chaired by women, manels being called out and named out. So those are all small measures. What we do need to see more is to have more women around us, and that will automatically improve a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think very well said, with this whole concept of, and we've been talking about it since yesterday also, that women need to find their voice. They need to be visible. They need to be seen. Because, one of the speeches which I had read, I think it was the head of Girls Who Code, who said that you can't be what you can't see. Girls can't be what they can't see. Yeah. So the role that role models play is very, very important. And of course, making it more systematic and institutionalizing it through network or through mentoring, coaching systems would, I think, give them the sort of boost that might be required to, as a sort of a launching pad, if you like, into a more successful and exciting and happy kind of a professional life. I'm just conscious of time, and I have one last question before we wind up the session, and it is to both of you. I mean, you've been in your careers, and you are also role models, and you are also women leaders. Share with this group here of your which achievements that you have achieved do you hold dearest to your heart? Do you think that yes, this is my defining achievement?
I think Sumedha is better prepared to answer. Go ahead first.
Okay, so it's very hard. I mean, there are probably a couple, but I would say that other than being a woman, there's, especially in a MNC, there's also this thing of being in India, right? And we are like India, like whatever outpost for MNC, right? So early in my career, when I was like about 30 years of age, we actually made a pretty major change in terms of technology that we use. for crosstalk signal integrity. I don't know if all of you can relate to it, but basically it's a pretty deep technology, and we created it from scratch, and it resulted in having a lot of improvement in terms of the chip yields and so on. It was a pretty fundamental thing, and people would get very surprised that it's being led by somebody from India, this 30-year-old. So I was pretty young then. I think, I did it. I mean, of course, the technical part was done by the team, right? I just took it up and did it. I think I was very naive. I underestimated what it was. I didn't even know it was such a big deal. And it gave me a lot of pride, of course, and it gave me a lot of confidence, right? And after that, everything I take up, like if I could do it at that time, then I can do this now, right? So it was just something I remember. It was, it was India more than a woman thing, but yeah, I really like that. Yes.
What's the second one?
Second one is more recent, and recently we did get international award for the D&I work we do in Intel India. We had led a lot of initiatives, including some places where we did it across men and women. Like we did a parenting initiative where men were as involved as women, right? So we did a lot of innovative work, and we got like a pretty big setting award. It was visible. So yeah, it was a high moment, I think. Yeah. So.
Yeah, very nice, very inspiring to hear these. For me, it's very difficult to list out achievements. Honestly, I really don't think I have done enough. My best is yet to come, is what I truly believe.
You're very young, Arpita, yes.
I think, getting invited by the British Council, we had like so fond memories of the British Council Library. I mean, getting invited for this panel itself is such a boost to me. I feel so motivated and so strengthened. However, if I am to really list down one thing which I'm really proud of, I have 5 graduate students, 5 PhD students who are females, and I'm proud of every one of them. And I have seen that transformation happen, from the day they entered IIT Bombay to what they are today. And I'm pretty sure none of them are going to settle into this really meek, timid, lady who always listens to others. I don't think any of them will be like that. That I consider to be my primary achievement. I'll give you an example. I have one student who's the mother of a child, a 5-year-old kid with severe learning disabilities. When she came in, she was just really, I couldn't do a PhD earlier because my husband and family would not support me. And I didn't do a job after master's because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a job or not. And now here she is, driving her parents to the vaccine center, driving her child to the therapy sessions. And she's so proud of the work that she's doing. So that I would consider to be my greatest achievement so far.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can see the fulfillment on your face, Arpita.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And as one of my mentors had told me many years ago, is that the success of a leader is in creating more leaders. So I think both of you have kind of established that, yes, definitely, that is, you are change makers yourself. And, in careers which tend to be considered not non-traditional for women, making your mark and showing to other women that this is possible, you're not alone, and this can be done. So it was a very enjoyable 1 hour speaking to you, and it was almost like a chat, like friends who were speaking and changing thoughts and ideas. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for this time, and really hope that the people who attended this session are inspired by the things that you have done and are able to sort of take home the message that I can also do this. Thank you, Arpita, and thank you, Sumedha.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Deepa, and the speakers for that lovely discussion and the workshop. I would like to welcome everyone to the second fireside chat of the summit, a very important one that looks at the shadow pandemic. The UN Women estimates that globally, 243 million women and girls aged between 15 to 49 have been subjected to physical and sexual violence in the last 12 months. Emerging data shows that since the outbreak of COVID-19, reports of violence against women have increased in several countries, as security, health, and money worries create tensions and strains, accentuated by the cramped and confined living conditions of the lockdown. You must note that more than half of the world's population was under lockdown conditions by early April last year. What has led us to such a situation? What can be done to mitigate this during the pandemic? And what needs to be done as we move towards post pandemic recovery? To shed more light on these critical questions, we have organized this fireside chat. Moderating this discussion is Amir Ramzan, Country Director, British Council, Pakistan. Amir has been working with the British Council since 2000 in multiple countries and various roles, including Country Director, Iraq, and Deputy Director in Nigeria and Syria. He has recently taken over as Country Director, Pakistan, following a stint as Country Director in Saudi Arabia. Amir is also the South Asia focal point in British Council for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. Before I hand over the session to the moderator, there are a few housekeeping rules that I'd like to lay down. The session is for 40 minutes and will end at 16:30 Indian Standard Time. There will be a buzzer 5 minutes before the session is scheduled to end. For participants, there is a Q&A section in which you can add your questions. Please note that this session is being recorded. With this, I'd like to hand over to Amir to take the session ahead.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you for that introduction. I hope everyone can see and hear me okay. So I'm really pleased to be asked to moderate this second virtual fireside chat on the topic of the shadow pandemic, understanding gender-based violence in a post-COVID world. As you all know, violence against women and girls unfortunately takes many forms, including physical violence, sexual violence, emotional, psychological, and economic violence. And as Pooja iterated, unfortunately, it seems as if the COVID pandemic has resulted in a significant increase in gender-based violence. In fact, the UN Population Fund estimates that for every 3 months of lockdown, 15 million additional gender-based violence cases will be recorded. So every 3 months of lockdown, 15 million extra gender-based violence cases will be recorded. That is an astronomical figure. So this is a 20% increase in violence during lockdowns. And violence against women tends to increase during emergency events and disease outbreaks. Thus, the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on violence fit into a larger panel. Obviously, this has a huge impact. It has an impact on the individuals who are, unfortunately, on the receiving end of this gender-based violence, on their physical, mental, emotional well-being, on their financial well-being, and therefore it also has an impact on their communities and societies because women are unable to contribute to their fullest in society. So the negative effects are all round. I'm really pleased today to be able to moderate this session or this fireside chat. And we've got two brilliant panelists, two panelists who have a long history of working in this area, combating gender-based violence and supporting gender equality. And they are Ms. Kamini Jindasa, founder and executive director of Shanti Murugam, and Ms. Kamla Basin, South Asia coordinator for 1 Billion Rising. Neither of them need an introduction, but just for the sake, but I will give a short one anyway. So Ms. Kamini Jindasa is a national and international expert in the fields of sexual and reproductive health, gender-based violence, engaging men and boys for gender equality. Kamini worked at the International Rescue Committee in New York as the primary prevention specialist, and she now works as a consultant for the World Bank as a senior gender specialist and GBV specialist for South Asia. Her former assignments have included developing the Women-Headed Household National Action Plan as gender advisor for UNFPA at the Ministry of Women and Child Affairs. And Kamini is executive director and founder of the Shanti Murugam, which explores innovative and multidisciplinary approaches to working with children to reduce violence in communities. And we also, of course, have Ms. Kamla Basin, Kamala has been actively engaged with issues related to development, gender, education, and media since 1970. Currently, she works for Sangat, a feminist network, as advisor, as well as Jagori, a women's resource and training center. She is the South Asia coordinator of 1 Billion Rising. She is deeply engaged with issues related to gender, patriarchy, men and masculinities, feminisms, sustainable livelihoods, peace, identity politics, militarization, human rights and democracy, and seeks to explore and articulate connections between these issues and to promote synergies between different movements. She has also written a large number of songs and slogans for the women's movement, books for children, and has created many posters and banners for various people's movement. I will start off by asking Kamini and Kamala a couple of questions each, and then we'll develop the conversation from there. If there's anything that you would like to add in terms of comments or questions, then please do type them into the question bar and I'll try and get to them and read them out. So maybe, Kamala, if I could, Miss Kamala, I could start with you, maybe, an initial question. So in your view, what has been the skewed impact of lockdown on the mental and physical well-being of women?
I think you're on mute. Kamala, you're on mute.
So friends, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Zindabad, equality and justice for all, Zindabad. On this afternoon, as I sit in this fireside chat, my mind, Amir, is a little fired up. And it has strange questions, difficult questions to me. So I wish to submit, first of all, in response to your question. And the title of this afternoon, for me, the gender-based violence itself is a pandemic, much larger, much more deadly than the COVID-19 pandemic. So for me, GBV is not a shadow pandemic at all. The violence against women pandemic affects, according to the WHO, 1 out of every 3 women. That makes it 1.2 billion. And by the way, 1 billion has 1,000 million. So way beyond what COVID has done and way beyond what during COVID violence has done to us, UNFPA reported in April 2020 that in the world, 140 million girls and women have been killed by patriarchy. 70 million out of those in China and 45 in my country, India, and the rest of 35 million in the rest of the world. So friends, for me, the virus of patriarchy is far deadlier than the COVID virus. And along with this virus, there are viruses of race, caste, class, which kill silently by millions. But the difference is the people in power belonging to the powerful gender, the powerful race, the powerful class, and the powerful caste, they're not interested in dealing with these viruses. So they continue. And my second point is, Amit, I was not at all surprised that the violence against women and girls increased by a few percentages. Poor men, they have never been at home with their children the whole evening. They can't go drinking beer. They can't go watching football. Look at the mental condition of these men. Here we are told to talk about women's mental condition, but look at the men's mental condition. The only thing they're expected to do is to earn money for the family. And the majority of them can't do just that anymore. So their whole masculinity is gone. The only thing they do. And my God, to be stuck in a little room with those children. I mean, you know, they came occasionally home, but to be stuck there, look at their poor mental condition. And my second point is, we should not be talking only about violence against women. I think we've done enough of that. Let's talk about violence by men, and not just on women, on children, on lower, so-called lower castes, working classes, the black race, all kinds of violence. Because the real problem is perpetrators, the people who do violence. That is where we need to finally have a discussion on them and ask ourselves, how do we change them? Because I don't believe violence has anything to do with biology. I don't believe any boy is born violent. We, the society, make them violent. So let's think about violent men rather than keep talking about these poor women. And we've done this enough. I mean, we've done it for far long enough. Now let's focus on violence by men, gender-based violence by men, which is linked to caste-based violence, race-based violence, class-based violence. Thank you very much, Amir.
Thank you so much, Kamla. That was hugely powerful. If I could just pick up on something there, if I may. You said men are not, it's not biological. You said it's society which makes men violent. And this is what we need to address. Could you just say a little bit more about how society breeds this violence and what can be done to address that, please, if that is the core of this issue?
I mean, in South Asia, at least especially in your country and mine, sons are gods. See the welcome they get when they're born. In my country, we have become so scientific that we don't even wait for the daughter to be born. We kill her now with the help of highly paid medical doctors. I was told when India became independent that when education will come, there'll be no violence against anybody. Damn it, it is all these educated doctors and educated families who are killing millions of children. It is all the propertied people who are killing their daughters. They love their property much more. And then the child is 2 years old and the uncle and auntie bring him a gun to play with. And we are very surprised when 15 years later he picks up a real gun and goes and shoots anybody in a mall in the USA or in a school in USA or in India or in Pakistan. We've trained them for 15 years. And then the entitlement. They can ask for food anytime. They are sent to the best schools. Property of the family is sold to send them for best education. They can urinate anywhere in India and Pakistan and the neighboring countries. No control. This entitlement. So when they are angry, especially at their women and children, they don't think, but they're not violent by nature. Because I don't know many men who do any violence to their boss, who is irrational and mistreats him. How many men go slap their bosses? You should see them shaking their tails, sir. Yes, sir. And he's talking nonsense, that sir. So this kind of entitlement, telling them they're gods, is responsible for this violence, but much, I mean, patriarchy, Amir, is a global system. Mr. Trump was a beautiful example of a patriarchal man in the oldest democracy. Not just patriarchal, racist, xenophobic, and see what he has left. 8 Asians killed yesterday somewhere. So patriarchy has been dehumanizing our poor children and men. It has been brutalizing them. And because they get so much benefit out of patriarchy, they don't think about it. We women only get shit from patriarchy, so we've been talking about it for hundreds of years. If we got benefits, yeah, upper class women get benefits. So when we are beaten up in our homes, we don't go out and shout, the bastard has hit me. Whereas a poor woman from a working class background, she walks out of her house and says, the bastard has hit me. She's not afraid, but I am afraid because that big car which I have and that jewelry and the beautiful holiday I had with him, so what if he beats me? And my God, so what that he has a new woman? As long as I have my cars and all, I bloody keep quiet about it. So we upper class women compromise. Because our class will go, the white woman's white race will go if she sided too much with the feminist movement. So just enough for her to get the rights from feminism, but not enough to take the risks of feminism. Thank you, Amira.
Thank you, so insightful. And I would like to come back to patriarchy a little bit later, but if I could bring Kamini in. Kamini, I would like to hear your thoughts as well on how the pandemic has induced, it's been a catalyst for gender-based violence, and also you would have heard Kamala there talking about patriarchy as being the key factor. Your thoughts and comments on that as well, please. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me clearly?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Well, firstly, I'd like to first acknowledge, given what this panel is about and how we've spoken about how GBV has increased so much during this time, that I'm aware that there can also be listeners on this call who have been dealing with gender-based violence within their homes. And just to acknowledge that and to encourage people to turn for support. So moving on and addressing your question, and of course, Kamalaji's comments as usual, very going straight to the point. But what is it that has led to this? As she said, GBV has been there always. It's been such a serious issue. We've been talking for years. Many people who are also on this panel or who are on this call have been working so much on this. And what we have seen is how women who are stuck at home with their abusers are now in a place where, or have been in a place where they couldn't get out and they couldn't access services. They couldn't step out and breathe for themselves. And also there were additional issues of, now say for example, in our South Asian region, a lot of women are actually employed in the informal sector. And that would mean you would either work from home or with small industries, or you would step out for domestic work or something like that. And so women also lost that opportunity of income, of financial independence. And so there's that also additional dependency for women on males. And as Kamalaji said, men who are in this place of, they're also dealing with this pressure of, a lot of people have lost jobs, we know that. And also there are the issues of, right, this issue is there. Anyway, we are a society, South Asia especially, where men are not encouraged to seek help for any pressures that they're experiencing, but we have recognized at least in some way that women can. But women are not able, the channels have closed down so much for them to seek support, which they usually would do. And also I wanted to point out the aspect of how the intergenerational transmission of violence. So we've seen a huge increase of violence within homes, and children are watching this. Children, and if parents are, or if a mother is experiencing violence, there's also a higher likelihood that the child is also. some research has shown this to us. And so, you know, we talk about, and we've started identifying the linkages of children who experience or witness violence against their mothers, have a higher likelihood of becoming perpetrators of violence and gender-based violence as they grow older. So this also then takes me to the conversation and questions that you raised on, but also the other aspect of race, because something we have seen that's been so terrible with COVID is that now, say, for example, in Sri Lanka, we have seen how governments have used COVID restrictions to further restrict and terrible environment for people of a particular religion, and in Sri Lanka, Muslims. And just imagine that stress level, and it's been used as a tool in so many ways, and it's increased violence in so many ways, not only within the home, but beyond as well. And I think COVID has really brought that out, and I'm glad at least beyond us, people are talking more about this issue of GBV. But going on to men and the way they look at it, and because also my work has had a lot to do with masculinities and been influenced by the thinking. So just referring to some statistics or information around work or evidence that I've been involved in the past. There was a very important study that was done by Partners for Prevention called UN Multi-Country Study on Men and Violence. And it showed, it was conducted in 6 countries. And it asked questions for men on as to, for men if they perpetrated rape and sexual violence. And from this sample that admitted that they had, almost 60, they were asked what were their motivations for perpetrating violence. And almost 60% said that it was due to a sense of sexual entitlement. And as Kamlaji said, boys are raised to believe that there's an entitlement, that they are entitled to anything that they see and anything that is around them. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I think there was a bit of feedback coming in, but we can hear you. Please carry on.
Okay. So that is one important place where we need to break this, because as Kamlaji said, let's stop talking about women who experience violence. Let's call it out. Men are the perpetrators of violence against women, mainly, right? And in addition to that, we found that amongst these groups who admitted to perpetrating rape, up to 30% of them had perpetrated their first rape when they were young, when they were between the ages of 15 to 19. So what does that say about the children and young people we are bringing into our world today? And also the same study, and we've seen this across other countries, checked on men and women's attitudes, on gender inequitable attitudes. We call this a GEM scale. And you found that as much as men upheld views such as attitudes such as, you know, it is a right thing to use violence to protect the honor of the family, women also agreed. So and there are a lot of situations where in these scales that you see that women are also agreeing to these patriarchal-led attitudes and beliefs. So there's a need to cut through all of this, but I feel, and that is why my work, and that's why I've established my own organization to work through with young boys and talking about, you know, let's change this narrative. Let's change this narrative of your sense of entitlement and accept and understand that everyone is equal. And also, you know, even the LGBT community, we saw that there was an increase amongst their community. And in terms of service provision, it's so limited because people don't understand and believe that there is intimate partner violence among the LGBT community relationships. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Kamini. Kamini, I just want to pick up on one thing. You spoke about channels. In a pandemic, some of the channels for reporting and some of the channels for support are no longer there. So what can communities do in the time of a pandemic to make sure those support networks are there? What can be done?
So this became a very challenging situation for service providers. And we live in a region where anyways, we have opacity in service provision and we're struggling. So the dependency was always on one-on-one, face-to-face service provision. And so organizations had to really switch to strengthening online or hotline service, providing services, at least in that way. So I saw a lot of organizations switching and really strengthening how they would reach out to potential survivors using social media, saying, you know, we're here, reach out to us, you can contact us. Of course, then you have the issue of who has access to online services, because we know that even amongst men and women, there's a disparity of women having less access to digital services than men. So that became a real challenge. And but you saw a lot of organizations having to adapt and provide services in that way. And also something that was done, say, at a higher level because of my work with the bank, is that in countries where there was a focus on health sector service provision, they started trying to really work with frontline responders, trying to train them to be able to screen and identify and direct people for better referral services and you know, a space for people to reach out to.
Yeah, thank you. It's really important that those measures are put in place. Kamala, if I could come back to you, I was intrigued by your example where you said a middle class or upper class lady may make less noise about gender-based violence than a poor lady because she has more to lose. I would like to talk about stigma, because this is based on stigma partly. Now, you know, the mantra often preached is that, you know, we need to educate girls so that they are less at risk, they are more independent, and they are more autonomous, so therefore they will suffer less. But that doesn't quite match with the example you gave, presuming that the middle class and upper class lady will be well educated. So I would like you to expand on that a little bit, and also really, what are some of the deeply held attitudes and beliefs that need to be challenged in relation to stigma around reporting? I believe you're on mute, Kamala. Thank you.
A brilliant book has been written in India recently called Chup. A Hindi Urdu word, Chup means silent. But the book is in English. It's written by a woman called Deepa Narayan, who was with the World Bank for decades, doing their poverty study all over the world. She's interviewed hundreds of women from the best institutions for women in India. And she finds that they are steeped in patriarchal thinking and patriarchal practices, despite their modern clothing and cosmetics. Some women today think that freedom feminists fought for is actually free market. So they think if they can choose the right color of lipstick, they are feminists. But I'm afraid that's not feminism. So I think unless we understand the intersectionality of class, race, caste, and patriarchy. Patriarchy bugs me, but class doesn't. I'm quite happy with the upper class status I have. And I want to protect it, you know, so that I can be on Zoom with British Council. I mean, the woman in the village who is a much bigger feminist than me, who has done the real fights, she can't be here because she doesn't speak this English, which I do. So I'm not going to give up my class status, and I won't question it. So, I mean, really, that book, Chup, needs to be read. And I just want to say, patriarchy is a social system. It is a global system. Women and men both believe in it. So we don't even have to say that women believe in it. Of course we believe in it. We are born in the same culture, the same religion. We are less educated. We are less exposed. We are less empowered. At times we believe in patriarchy much more. But the question is, who sets the rules? Who decides what is right or wrong? Our religions, our cultures, who controls them? Men, exclusively. And we do not question religion. It's a matter of faith, madam. And that is where these problems emerge. And Amir, as long as we have patriarchy, we will have violence against women, because violence against women in patriarchy is not an accident. It is structural. If you want race to continue, you do have to do violence to the blacks so that they know what their place is. Every now and then a white police to put his leg on his neck and say, here it is, you have to do it. So that the rest of the blacks don't think they're now really the Constitution is working. It doesn't. And it is absolutely true that women are the ones who are given the responsibility to teach patriarchy to girls and boys. These are well-known facts. Similarly, the well-known fact is that for me, the fight for women's empowerment and equality is not a fight between men and women. Not at all. Look at the men who have fought for our rights, from the Buddha to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When did he give rights to women? 1500 years ago. Where? In a region where women had zero rights. From zero to bring us to 50% is a hell of a lot. No other institution has done it till now. Similarly, the people who made our constitutions, 95% of them were men who said men and women are equal. So who says this fight is between men and women? You are a man, Amir, and you are talking about this issue. This fight is between two mindsets, two ideologies, two belief systems. One says patriarchy is superior, better, let's continue. The other says no, equality is better. That's why we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That's why I have the Indian Constitution. Let's follow this. And on both sides, there are women and men and transgenders. And I think high time that we people who seem to be so concerned about women, we focus on the real problem. It doesn't help going on talking about this beautiful sanitized word called gender. Let's call a spade and call it patriarchy. The World Banks and all the others will only talk about gender. They will not talk about class. They will not talk about race. They will not talk about neoliberal capitalism. Today, more than religious patriarchy, it is capitalist patriarchy which is killing us, women and men. The way they are stereotyping, everything is gendered. Pornography is a $1 billion industry. Child pornography, $1 billion industry. Cosmetics, which makes 85% women feel dissatisfied with their bodies. God, who is there to tell me what color my hair should be? And who's there to tell me that I could have removed these through surgery? My beauty is in my character. Who said it was in my face? And why is only my beauty in my face and not in the face of my man? Why? Because he only needs a big bank balance. And I am just a body, as long as women are just bodies perpetuated by capitalism. As long as we are just bodies, you don't have to think beating your wife. She's just a body. She's half a human. Like, you don't have to think before violating a black person. A Vadera doesn't need to think. Hitting out at that, landless laborer. We are not human. Indigenous people are not human. We are part of nature, you know, we are insects.
Kamala, you describe some really deeply, deeply entrenched ideologies. You know, you talk about the financial system supporting patriarchy. I guess my question is, what advice would you give policymakers? And can policy enough change this status quo?
I'm afraid I have no hope from the policymakers. They have brought this world here. These policymakers are too bright not to know what patriarchy is, too bright not to know what class and race are. So I'm not going to fool myself and say, let me tell them. They know it. They are the ones. And forget about women. Look at Mother Nature, what these policymakers have done. People who sit in the World Economic Forum every year, they know it, Amir. Let's not, and we, most of us sitting here are part of that system. Let's also not fool ourselves. I am part of that system sitting here speaking in this English. I'm part of that system. Yeah, in my speech, I may sound a bit radical. But what about my standard of living? What about the way I live? What kind of car do I use? How many air conditions do I use and pollute this world? So we are all part of it, come from the farmers' protests and the people's protests and the human rights protests all over the world.
Thank you, Kamala.
Yeah.
Kamini, if I could ask you to come in on any advice you would have for policymakers in curbing gender-based violence, please.
Thank you. First, I'd like to take a few steps back also, because it's not such a simple, you can't do policies. It's not such a straightforward way of dealing with this issue. We need to understand that GBV is part of a larger issue, that it's part of the large acceptance of violence we have within the world and the sense of impunity that people who hold power have. And if we look at the South Asian region, for example, we've experienced a lot of violence. And we've gone through colonialism, we've gone through so much communalism and violence, splitting of countries. We've turned so much against each other. And if you look at even in Sri Lanka, we've had a 30-year war. And through my work, I strongly believe, and through my philosophy also, is that hurt people hurt people. So when you see violence happening within homes, as Kamnaji said, and we said, there's no space for men also to reach out for services. And I think first we need to acknowledge that we are a region that is heavily steeped in accepting violence and no spaces to heal. So for me, when I look at how do we handle this situation? I mean, for example, when we talk about mass shootings, we find that those who have been mass shooters have a history of perpetrating domestic violence within homes.
That's right.
Right. So we need to understand that violence within homes is a continuum of violence outside. And how is violence allowed? It's allowed because politicians and laws are not supporting holding people accountable for their actions. So for me, I see a number of ways and policies that could perhaps support it, but I think it's also a very individualized thing. Because, for example, how do I think if self-reflection is a core part of this work. And if we look at ourselves honestly, we will find that in some way or the other, we have all used violence in our lives through speech, through actions, right? And it starts truly with ourselves. I mean, policies are there where we are a society where we don't have a higher consciousness and you have to impose rules and regulations. But what if now with COVID, there was a belief that, a lot of us were feeling, people are beginning to understand that money isn't everything, that it's more understanding each other and being connected with each other, that is the important thing in this world, and therefore feeling each other. For example, in South Africa, there's a wonderful term called Ubuntu. What affects you affects me. So for me, before policy, I believe it all stems from how we look at ourselves and how we then bring our philosophy into the world of our relationships, into the world of interactions with anyone, into the world of work. Right? And then also the aspect of creating spaces for healing, creating spaces and acknowledging that everyone hurts in some way. If we say that, oh yeah, we're after a 30-year war and everything is fine and there's peace in the country, that is ridiculous, because people from all sides have lost people. And then how do you deal with this? Because we saw in the North, for example, post-war, that there was an increasing violence, domestic violence in homes, because you had been exposed to so much violence and lost so much. So we really need to acknowledge that people hurt and people are hurting, and we need to create the space for everyone.
Thank you.
And of course, I think from a very technical perspective, I would say, if you're looking very specifically at policies, a lot of countries do have good policies and laws around domestic violence. So we need to ensure they're implemented better. And I think everyone has a role to play in that. Plus also ensuring that we have better service provision and accessible high quality service provision. And also, I think working with the next generation, understanding that youth are not just, I'm sad to see when we see programs for youth, we only see them as potential cash cows for the global economy versus individuals who are going to, they can change this world and they have so much insight and they have also seen a lot. So I feel policy should also be about understanding the holistic nature of a young person and child and grooming them. And once again, for them, creating spaces for growth and understanding that Ubuntu, where what hurts you hurts me and we're all one, right? And I think at a policy level, understanding that children should not be subjected to violence within homes. Sadly, it has to be done through laws as the way it is being done at the moment. Child protection within homes, violence within schools, that they don't have to experience corporal violence, corporal punishment, and in societies. So
thank you, Kamini. So rich, and I really liked your comments around self-reflection, a place for healing, thinking about the next generation, all really important points. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I wish we could go on. I mean, I've personally, I've been living my life in online meetings for the past year, but this has been the most impactful session I've been in. I would like to thank you both for your honesty, for your passion, for your frankness. It's been inspiring, and I'm sure the audience feel equally inspired. Like I said, I do wish we had more time, but I think we've all took something away from this session around something we can do, think about personally and professionally. So thank you both very much, and please take care of yourselves. Bye.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bhasin and Ms. Kamani, for such a powerful discussion. The points discussed were extremely important to be addressed and put across. Thank you, Amir, for the wonderful moderation and ensuring that the essence of this session comes out in the best way possible. With this, I'd like to hand over to Deepa to introduce the next session and the session chair.
Thank you, Pooja. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Deepa, you're audible and visible too.
Right, thank you. So thank you, Pooja, and we now come to the final part of this two-day summit. I can scarcely believe that it's drawing to a close. We are at the valedictory session, and it's been a very interesting 2 days. Well, 2 half days really. We started off with the inaugural session, which spoke about various aspects of leadership, feminist leadership, women's leadership, mainstream leadership, and we had people from different sections, different walks of life talking about and sharing their points of view. We spoke about the socioeconomic realities of the pandemic. We looked at case studies from our ongoing programs in the region. We looked at case studies from Bangladesh on media for empowering women. We looked at case studies from Sri Lanka on gender-based violence. We had a very eminent panel on climate change. Today we started with a very powerful panel on representation matters. We spoke about various aspects of representation, from so-called non-traditional sectors. We spoke about women with disabilities, and we had a woman from political background, a member of parliament, who spoke about her journey as a woman leader. And we spoke about women in STEM, and then of course the penultimate session, which was about gender-based violence. The really powerful, passionate speakers were there. I think it has been a really amazing journey. But I think it's now time to take a little step back and say that, okay, we have looked at all these different aspects of leadership, of gender equality from diverse perspectives. So now what? What lies ahead and what needs to be done? What is the call to action? And that is basically the purpose of this valedictory session, is for us to reflect a little bit and see what we can do in our capacities and in the roles that we represent, in the roles that we occupy. To chair this session, we have British Council Regional Director, Adrian Chadwick. Adrian, welcome to the session, and I hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, Deepa, and thank you everyone for all of the contributions to what's been a really enthralling couple of half days. So well done, and thank you to everybody. And as you say, this is sadly the final session, and it's a session which has a stellar panel. In a second, I'll introduce them, and has something of a task as the panel shares their experience to try to tease out, as you said, some sense of call to action and ways forward. We wanted with this two-day summit to really create an online platform, a safe space where voices would be listened to and valued and heard, and to use that platform to really give access to case studies, to stories, to inspiring role models, and to networks, which would collectively contribute to progressing gender equality and women's leadership, including particularly through digital platforms. And some of the key questions, as you alluded to when you played back the discussion from some of the sessions, were, how can increasing women's meaningful representation in underrepresented fields foster equality? And how can we as leaders choose to challenge? And how can we at the regional level, and something which of course particularly interests the British Council, as all topics do, but that regional angle as well is very important. How can we collaborate more closely? So as we go into the final session here, those are the kind of questions we'll have in mind. As I say, we've got a truly excellent and inspiring panel today, and I want to begin by just thanking them for making the time to join us. We've had a huge diversity of speakers, actually. I think we're going to have had something like 28 different speakers through the 2 half days. And as Deepa said, certain issues have surfaced again and again. And let's see if we can pull some of those strands together. So let me turn first of all, if I may, to Anoka Aberatne. I'm assuming everybody's read the full bios. So let me just say, Anoka, advocate, social entrepreneur, founder of an eco-social enterprise, empowering women across the region, recipient of numerous roles and awards, and members of international organizations, and a trailblazer with numerous firsts to her name. So let me, without further ado, turn to Anoka as our first contributor and ask Anoka, please, to do a couple of things, I think, really, to share your journey and share with the audience the challenges, the hurdles, the successes as you went through, and maybe also to reflect to us on whether you, as you look at the situation of gender equality in the region and perhaps beyond today, whether you see young women and young people having more opportunity, are able to reach and build on the leadership achievements of the last 10 or 20 years. So Anoka, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Adrian. for the very kind introduction. It's amazing to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So just to speak a little bit about my journey, I think I really need to go back so many years because I started out very, very young, and I was definitely a product of a very traumatic event that happened in Sri Lanka, the tsunami. And through that, I learned when we were trying to just save the environment to stop any other future challenges in terms of tsunamis, that people really need to be empowered. Because there was no point of just trying to set up a campaign or an initiative unless you have people on board and unless they were really getting something in return. So that learning has sort of stayed with me and my team and all of us as we've grown through that social entrepreneurial journey. And even when we were working with different communities, especially because I'm a part of the British Council Active Citizens Program as well. And through that, we empower a lot of people from very rural areas across Sri Lanka as well. And even through that initiative, we come across a lot of people who really need that little support to go that extra mile. So for example, something that I've noticed is we have a lot of programs for women, but even for them to come to that program, the British Council sometimes gives a little stipend. It's something very small. Sometimes it's like 20 rupees a day, but that translates into so much for these ladies and these women from these communities, because that 20 rupees sometimes is part of their daily wage or their income. So you can't really spend it, because that means one of your children might be going hungry if you didn't really sort of get that stipend. So these are the little nuances that I've noticed while we were doing all of this work for all this time. And I definitely do believe that the activism, all the incredible work that's been done by people before me, including people like my grandmother's generation, my mom's generation, all of these incredible people. There's a saying, we stand on the shoulders of giants. It's so true, so very true. And being supported by all of these incredible women, men, everybody really, because you need everyone to work together and come on board. That's really supported not just our journey, but even the people we work with, the people we want to empower. Because at the end of the day, it's not about me or someone from outside the community trying to go in and tell them, hey, you got to do this so that you can do better. It's more about sort of inspiring and bringing all of them to a point where they understand, look, if we want to be in political parties, if we want to represent my community up there someday, then I really need to work hard, be self-empowered, so that I won't be sponsored by someone, or I don't need to go and sort of beg for a nomination. I'm already strong enough to have that kind of support. So that's the kind of empowerment that we love to sort of create, and we are creating at the moment. So I hope that answered your questions, Adrian. And I really look forward to conversations as well.
Thanks, Anuka, and that's fascinating. Just before we go on to the next panelist, let me just ask you just to say a little bit more about that idea of self-empowerment and how you unlock it, how you enable it.
Oh, I wish I found the secret recipe for it, but I do really think that social enterprise is so key for it, because for example, I used to work for an INGO before, and I was given the task of turning a project that had been funded for 10 long years into a social enterprise. So unfortunately, even through these 10 years, the people who were part of the project hadn't gained the skills to make it viable and break even. They had no business skills, nothing else. So these are the little things that we really need to work on for the future. When you say self-empowerment, things like social enterprise has the capability to not just help communities and people and help them get that financial freedom to really go out there and represent themselves or gain those leadership skills, even have access to all of those courses or whatever that might help them go that extra mile, because that is so important, especially whether it's a digital age or not. You still need to have certain presence, you still need to present yourself, and all those skills I think can be gained if you are able to be self-empowered. And that's definitely something I've seen with our work and countless other enterprises and people that I talk with on a daily basis as well, that social enterprise really does help communities to be self-empowered.
Thank you very much indeed, Anoka, for the opening comments, and lots to unpack and explore as we go through this panel. Thank you. I'd like to turn next, please, to Farah Kabir, Country Director of Action Aid in Bangladesh. Farah, as Country Director, is combating poverty and injustice and standing up for women and children in the most marginalized communities. She's also a member and chair of many national, regional, international boards, and is very active in many social areas, including climate, and has been awarded National Prize. So we'll turn next to Farah, if we may. Again, if you could tell us a bit about your journey and your learnings and insights along the way, and also how you feel equal leadership in community, corporate, and government and empathy are going to widen perspectives and ensure justice for all genders.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you to the British Council for inviting me. I think when I try to think of my journey, I feel that I'm so privileged because parents were progressive. They broke so many barriers. They brought us up as human beings, did not understand whether one was a woman, a girl, or a boy. Me and my sibling, we grew up with a lot of things taken for granted, whether it was about reading, whether it was about playing. But as one progressed into life and started, and then there was also I am a child of post-liberation. So I was 10, 11, and so I've seen the Liberation War and then the aspirations of my parents and their groups for equity, freedom, and it had an impact on us. But reality was so different. We faced famine in 1974, and I've seen how each individual, my mother, everyone making food, giving them, so our values were shaped by the independence war and so on. But life, of course, started changing. Now, in terms of my journey, I think I've been very privileged. I've had support and trust from many people. But as I was working, it became very clear about how the different communities are viewed and the power dynamics. I mean, I always enjoy listening to Kamala Basin and absolutely share that it's patriarchy is so deep that even with all the conversations with friends, with family, we still get stuck there, I mean, there are two sets of values. One is when we are talking intellectually, we can understand, relate to equity and so on, and then in practice. And so over the years, it's been absolutely an agenda to try and stand up for the rights of anyone whose rights are being violated. But as I went into the professional life, it became clear the rights of women and girls, marginalized communities was triply violated, and they didn't have. So it was, how does one work around that? And so the opportunities when I worked in British Council for 10 years, creating platforms, opening up spaces, investing in women's leadership. So that's been my 10 years, whether it was in Bangladesh and even in the UK. My experience in the UK initially was quite shocking because I had not realized that there was a South in the North. And then when I went into the communities and I found out the level of poverty, of opportunities, or gender-based violence, all that was very persistent, prevailing in those societies. So once back in Bangladesh, it was about how do we work, and Action Aid's entire mandate is to work to support gender equity, women's leadership. So that's been my opportunity to invest in. The initial work was more around women's leadership in emergencies, because this is a country which is very prone to disasters. And there is social discrimination and social disasters, but then when there is the other disasters like flooding and river erosion, it multiplies the discrimination, it multiplies the problem. So it was about how do we work with the community, and then found out that it was about working with the women. And they had the indigenous knowledge. It was about listening, learning from them. It was about working with their experiences. And we were basically a catalyst. It wasn't, I seriously think that one cannot empower the other person. One just facilitates, one creates opportunities. It's within. And just as it is within, the biases, the prejudices is also within. And this is where we are struggling when we are talking about, representation in the traditional or underrepresentation fields. No field should be underrepresented as far as I'm concerned. But it's about, no, you can't do this. You can't do the whole journey, the narrative that's out there is about what a woman can't do or what a woman is not capable of. It's usually not about what she can do, other than that, when it comes to the paradox there is when it comes to being a mother, she's put on a pedestal. But then the same woman is somebody's daughter, is a human being, and those concepts don't exist, or they are there, but they're pushed under the carpet. And in terms of working in the society, I found that people have these comfort zones, and it's much easier than to challenge. So one had to be both out there taking the challenges, and somebody in an earlier session had said that role models are important. So trying to, as part of a feminist thinking, it was about what are the values? How do I apply them? How do I practice them? And creating numerous leaders within the organization, because I'm working in an organization. So I'm so pleased to see that so many of our colleagues who are the next generation of leaders working in multiple organizations, in movements and so on. So that is important, believing and investing. But for a woman to be able to take on leadership, the most crucial thing is that we have to address the barriers. And the barriers are violence. And one is the mindset of constantly being told of what you can or you cannot do. You can't even breathe without somebody's permission. It can go to that extent. So that has to stop. And women have to believe that I can do, I am capable. So part of this was not the formalized mentoring, but creating those spaces where one listened, one learned, one heard from the women in the community, whether it was in my own area or it was going to a disaster prone, and what is it they needed or we needed, and exchanging. I learned from them, they learned from me. So the other point I want to emphasize is if we want women's representation in different fields, we want to foster it, we have to create knowledge leadership. Now, sometimes women don't necessarily have the institutional or the certification. Let that not be a barrier. Let's talk about indigenous knowledge. Let's create those spaces where they can take on leadership. And leadership is not just at the top, at every space available at every moment. And once you start doing that, you can see how women become confident and they take charge. My last point here would be, I do not want to see women leadership in any position, in any structural system, reinforcing patriarchy. If we want to talk about women's leadership or we want to talk about transgender leadership, we do not want to go back to promoting and reinforcing patriarchy. It has to be the new leadership, the new norm.
All right, thank you so much indeed. I think you may have to go fairly shortly. Can I squeeze a quick response to a question from you?
Yes, I'm with you for 10 more minutes because I have to go on a board meeting. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I think it's fascinating actually on many, many levels, one of which as someone who also works for a large international organization, and we wrestle and try to make progress in many of these complicated areas and try to move more to action, to challenge, to calling out practices which don't align with our organizational values and so on. So very, very interesting listening to all of that. there's a strength and a power coming through words, violence, barriers, and listening, and there's an authenticity from when you've been listening to women in their local environment and learning from them about their challenges and those small differences. How do you take those stories? How do you take that learning and influence policy and influence and take it to academia and to others to inspire and also to affect policy?
So from the way we have worked, or I have, my journey is that I listen and then I share. And because otherwise, what gives me the mandate to go out there and speak on behalf of anybody? I'm not a politician. No one elected me. And if I'm working in an organization, then I have to comply, or I have the mandate of the organization. But here, what I have been doing is I'm trying to hold up the rights of women, or human rights, basically. And so then ActionAid is an organization which allows you to have a political position. This is why I work for this organization. I mean, I worked 10 years in British Council and broke a lot of barriers in the British Council. I don't know if Adrian, if you know about it, but I was one of the troublemakers. So, you know, about women's rights, gender, inclusion, and so on. So ActionAid enables me also. It has empowered me that I don't have to go by the script, and it's not coming from any headquarter, because the values we share is about feminism, it's about standing up for equity and universal values. It can't be tailored to different regions and different countries. It can't be tailored to different situations and moments in time. And this is why I constantly, when I talk to our policymakers, I keep saying that you have provided impunity and you tolerate violence. It's not just gender-based violence. You are tolerating violence in the form of corruption, partisan behavior, and name it. So taking the views from the ground and then providing the learnings from the ground has helped me to work with the policymakers. No policy changes overnight. And it takes a lot of investment. The sad part is that we've managed, I mean, you know, from ActionAid, we managed to change a lot of policies in Bangladesh. And even we have taken on the climate negotiation parts, I've been default representing at some of the COP meetings. But what happens is we manage to get 7 steps ahead, and then the vested group puts in a spanner, and then it kind of pushes us 50 steps back. So we managed to get the domestic violence legislation, but there's no application of it. People don't know, women don't know, and the understanding of a domestic violence legislation is that it's about resolving a dispute between the husband and the wife. There's no understanding, and however much you're trying, it's difficult for them to get out of the mindset. When it came to the child policy, we managed to talk about and get the child policy or stop early child marriage, but then they quickly put in the name of cultural values that if the parents think it's in the interest or it's socially important, then they can marry the 16-year-old. And they cite examples of the rest of the world where there is early child pregnancy and so on. So this pulls us back. So we have to connect globally and influence policymakers globally. So if you are in the UK, I mean, I would lobby with you to go and talk to your parents. If you are in India, I would lobby with them, because the politicians, they have such a strong club association. You know, they share the same, because it's not about being with the people or for the people. That's just rhetoric. It's about staying in politics, staying in position for 5 years and thinking about the next election and making money. So this is where we have to step in. And I think women can bring this change. The climate change discourse, it's been such a strong protest from the women's group across the world, because they are the protectors of the environment, or they are collecting women. They are living, you know, it impacts on their life on a regular basis. So I think because of where I am, it has helped me to bring those voices up and take it to the policymakers. Whether the policymakers will listen, well, you have to have a lot of patience. But my personal experience in Bangladesh is when it came to climate, we managed to do a lot of changes. So we have the Climate Vulnerable Forum, adaptation, and so on. When it comes to gender-based violence, no way. It just goes in circles. And this is where we need to crack. And I have also been talking about that. It's about looking at it from the men's perspective. I've been asking men that, how do you live with this? The entire narrative is protect the girl, protect the women from the men, from the boys, from the predators. How do men live with this? So I want to throw back a question to you and everyone here. Why do men accept it? Is every man a predator? Is every man wanting to violate, or there are a small proportion? And when will we have this conversation? When can we join hands and change and transform the world?
Thank you, Farah. Thank you. And that's a very thought-provoking way to close out that contribution. Thank you. And it's a call to action to all of us, and reflection, a call for reflection as well, and understanding our agency and how much we're exercising it, I think. Let me now, if I may, just move on to Tanzila Khan, our next panelist.
And I take leave. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Farah. Thanks for that session. And we'll obviously update you on the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So yes, please, let me just continue to introduce Tanzila, who is an entrepreneur, an award-winning mobile app creator, a digital native, someone who has published and who has reinvested, who's plowed back the proceeds of the book sale into an NGO and into empowering women in the community. So there's a fantastic kind of virtuous circle of using new technologies and publishing and then empowering women. And Tanzila, if you could again, as with the first two panelists, please, if you could tell us your journey, your story, and some of the insights and learning, and maybe in your case as well, if you could reflect particularly on the digital world. I mean, we hear a lot about the digital divide, and it's genuine and it's real, and it's a major obstacle, and yet somewhere in there presumably is an opportunity to accelerate change, to reach scale. So what are the kind of tools and opportunities, as well as some of the challenges that you see?
Thank you so much, Adrian, and Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Tanzila, and I'm the founder of Girly Things, that is a mobile application through which we deliver sanitary napkins and other SRHR, reproductive health-related products to women across Pakistan. As a female with disability, I understand what barriers feel like when you're not a criminal. And I think it has nothing to do with having a disability. Sometimes we are segregated because of the access we have towards opportunities. In the case of women, having access to a simple sanitary napkin is a huge taboo in Pakistan. And I came across that taboo when I believe that I'm an empowered woman, I'm moving around the world so independently, but I could not have access to a sanitary napkin because there isn't a single wheelchair accessible shop in my own city that I've lived for such a long time. And I was on the road, I started my period. Everything changed. My entire definition of empowerment of a woman changed. And British Council has been very integral in my journey. For the first time when I attended the summit in India, Youth Activism Summit, yes, by the British Council. And I remember Ma'am Sadia Rahman, she made sure that I reached there safely and I come back, and also ensured that my disability needs are taken care of. And then fast forward to the Women of the World Festival, that also acknowledged a lot of work that I did in terms of disability and women empowerment. So I thought my life is sorted, but something so basic is not being catered to, and that is my healthy menstrual lifestyle. And that made me jump into this ocean of different issues, solutions, ideas, and it all boiled down to girly things. Something that I did, which has labeled me quite a troublemaker, is that I took the concept of entrepreneurship, menstrual health care, and IT. And I took it to the man's world, the entrepreneurial world, where all the money is, all the opportunities are. And that's where you make the big decisions that impact the entire world. And I said, hold it, I'm coming there and I'm going to be talking about a feminine issue. I want equal attention and investment for this cause, just like we would have for a toothpaste or a shampoo.
Menstrual hygiene is not a charity cause, it's a lifestyle that women have. And for me to speak up about a feminine issue in that space to men, that was something quite new and something that I wasn't prepared for as well, because I thought it's common sense, but unfortunately it wasn't present everywhere. So because it's a startup, I had to take it to different platforms to pitch it and raise investment. And it's been 3 years. Girly Things has raised no investment, and we're doing pretty fine. We're funding ourselves, we're sustainable, we're expanding to other countries. Hopefully by this year, we're expanding to Turkey as well. And this is because we as a feminine brand were not seen serious enough. People expected us to work on beauty. They're not ready to have a conversation on SRHR. And I also felt that we have very few female investors. Not that that matters. Any investor is an investor, and they should be able to identify a subject and issue because of the market value that they have. But in our case, we had trouble finding an ear to just speak up about the menstrual health care. And believe me, everybody, I could write a book on all the funny things that could happen. I mean, I literally had to walk into this room that had people, men mostly, with a lot of money, but no vision. And the conversation would not move from biology. I mean, how will I get to the numbers and the vision that I have for my company if I have to sit here and tell you what biology is and how does the menstrual cycle really works? And this wasn't just the case for Pakistan. This was also the case for a couple of other countries that I was presenting. I was there to receive an award. And we had to compete for a further category. And I remember the jury asking questions like, it's not a big deal what you're doing. Women have been menstruating since ages. It's not really a problem. It's not a problem. But the access, the barriers, the taboo is a problem. And it's making women not access opportunities in an equal way. Young girls, agricultural population of Pakistan, like almost 70%, women, young girls in schools, they're made to quit school just because they're going to bleed every month. So they're not even given the choice to opt for education. And that goes all the way to the time once they bleed, they're meant to get married off. So the whole idea of getting access to a lifestyle that they could have chosen for is missing. And this is a conversation that we must have. Being in the entrepreneurial space, also the future is technology. And when we were developing the mobile application, now I'm not a tech person, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm an activist. What happened? We were looking for female people, female technologists, female techies, and we couldn't find them. And I'm like, why aren't girls picking these technical, stronger subjects in school? And that was another area that we highlighted, that we need more women to be part of these different arenas and pick these spaces, because women are a huge market. There are products that are available for women, but they're accessed in a very different way when it comes to both the genders. For example, even a mobile phone, probably I would have to take permission. I would need someone to take me to the market to just buy a mobile phone, but probably my brother or my dad or my any other male cousin could just walk to the market and get any phone they like. Having said that, so the world is missing out on a huge market because they're not focused on access. And luckily, I understood this concept very well because of my own disability. So being a wheelchair user myself, I think it has definitely been very lucky for me. And moving further, I'd also like to share about my vision of becoming a female investor in future, because we need to occupy that space. So my vision is not that Girly Things becomes like a unicorn. I really hope that one day we have enough money, enough products under our belt, and we're able to fund other startups run by other genders, by females. Other than that, I would also like to highlight that 8th March has passed and we saw a lot of campaigns, a lot of conversation happening. But how many directorial positions were launched that day? I mean, I received a box of chocolates. I did receive flowers. I did receive very yummy cupcakes. But I did not receive any investment, which I'm definitely after. And I did not receive any news of any of my brilliant fellows, female fellows, becoming directors or getting higher managerial positions. So that is a conversation I'm definitely highlighting this year. And last but not least, I would also like to announce that I have ventured into filmmaking, and we produced this short film called Fruit Chart. It's a comedy film on disability, and we're highlighting this woman's journey in a man's world on a wheelchair, and how she goes through the challenges of first finding an education. But throughout her journey in the university, she has to take help from men because the infrastructure is not wheelchair friendly. So they need, like she needs strong men to pick her up, put her on the stage, or help her go up the stairs. And that's a conversation itself, because again, women with disabilities are made to rely on men rather than have accessibility through which they could go up and down themselves. And the journey continues. So I think this short film is an award-winning short film. It received the Z Content Festival Award just last month, but it also highlights a female wheelchair user's journey in this world. And furthermore, just one recommendation I'd like to just add in is that we need a diversity on all levels, which I also came across this session, someone highlighted, but also in terms of disability. I think disabled women have wonderful ideas because they know what's it like to have a barrier in their life. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chandila. That's fascinating and has so many avenues to unpack and explore. I mean, I think possibly the one that struck me and sort of surprised me most is the blindness of investors and the blindness of business, because even if they're not inspired by the social opportunity or the support it will give to 50% of the population, you would hope they would be inspired by the opportunity to invest in a good thing.
Yeah.
And yet what you're saying is that for cultural or they just weren't accustomed to it, patriarchal thinking, they were just not viewing this in commercial terms.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, you're right. And I think they're missing out on a huge opportunity by doing this.
And how might one go about, do you think, opening up space for the commercial world to understand to recognize the commercial potential, to look beyond gender stereotypes and see the opportunity?
I'm a huge fan of collaboration, and I think I have come so far because I have not been a disabled activist. I think I've been an activist who has spoken up for all causes. I spoke up for the trans community, for the SRHR issues, for environment, for education. I think taking ownership of each other's causes and amalgamating it with your own power. I always say one thing, that we need to sing happy birthday for each other. I mean, that sounds better. We don't sing happy birthday for ourselves. So I think collaboration and taking ownership of each other's causes would be a huge benefit. And I think so far that has been something that has really worked for me. I always work in terms of collaborating with another organization, with someone else who's an influencer. And even in the commercial space, there are people who are great actors, some are great writers, there are people who have good camera presence. So I think it's time people who have these platforms, even if you have an NGO, you have investment, anything, it's time we start listening to each other's stories and we try to incorporate that with our own, because by the end of the day, I think we pretty much have the same story with different dimensions. And that is something I've learned even when I was making this short film. I was acting in it, playing a woman with a disability, but I could resonate with a widow who's probably living in Mardan right now. And I felt that these are the same challenges somehow she's also facing if she's asking her neighbor to buy her some potatoes from the market because she probably can't go out. And the same conversation must be happening there.
Thank you. Great idea, great image of sort of collaborating and championing and celebrating each other's causes. Thank you. Let me turn to our final panelists now for their opening remarks. Of course, last but by no means least, Professor Vasanthi Srinivasan, who is a very distinguished academic, a member of many influential boards and nationally and internationally, and has published nationally and internationally. And it seems to me sort of operates in this intersection between business and leadership, and where business and leadership intersects with social issues, with gender, ethics, human rights, human resources. So very, very relevant to so many of the topics which have been discussed. And great to have a distinguished academic giving us their insight in this panel. So Professor Vasanthi, if you could, as our first three panelists, please talk to us about your journey and your learnings along the way, and maybe reflect a little bit on what you're seeing when you're looking at the business world. we see ups and downs. We see maybe an increase in the number of female CEOs in FTSE 500s, and yet we read McKinsey and other reports about devastating numbers of women middle managers who have moved out of work because of the pandemic and the disproportionate impact it's had. So I wonder if you could tell us your story and reflect on the state of the kind of leadership landscape as you look at it.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Adrian. And I think very inspiring 3 speakers, and coming in after that, I think it just reaffirms all the work that I have done over the years. So my work, I entered the world of diversity by sheer accident, okay? In 2000, when I used to be a consultant, that was the period of rapid growth in India, and companies were tripling their headcount. The number of women who were entering colleges was increasing. The numbers who were coming into engineering education was increasing. And at that point in time, having spent almost 15 years of my life looking at human resources and diversity and the source of competitive and strategic advantage for organizations, I just paused and said, what's it that's happening here? Why is everyone speaking about women? I mean, we've always existed. Why is it that corporations suddenly want to know more about what does it mean to have more women in the workforce? So I do remember my first comment to the CEO of a large company saying, why do you need a woman? I mean, what made you think of me? Because I've left my consulting career and I'm now an academic. You have no use for academics anyway, so why would you think of me? And very jokingly, he turned around and said, we need you now more than ever because we have a lot of women. I said, wow, so you needed me as another woman there, not really as an academic. And I wasn't joking about it because I now went in 2001 and started interviewing the women who had joined the workforce. And I also interviewed the men, because the advantage of being in a management school like mine is that you're looking at everything as a research problem with representative sample. And I think it's exactly that particular skill that made me have these conversations. And then I walked out and I said, you're going to get a lot of women, but you're not going to be able to retain them. And the CEO was just shocked. So he said, that doesn't say well, because it must be, so what is in your research that's actually saying that? And I said, what you've got are women who fit your criteria of what it means to be a good employee. But remember, and this was the starting of all these new age industries, financial services, pharmaceutical, IT, all of these in the insurance. So I said, this industry is a new age industry, and all the skills that are needed can be acquired by women more than the traditional manufacturing very easily. And therefore, what you're seeing here is educated women who do not have career aspirations. So what you're providing them is a job. My request to you is, please get your male leaders to spend time with them, to get them to think about what a career would look like. And of course, this was not to be taken seriously because this was the time that more and more women were coming in, and companies somehow thought that these women will just enter mid-careers and will grow. And 2003 onwards, quite honestly, I didn't turn to become an activist. I had absolutely no ideas of speaking of diversity or even being recognized as a champion of diversity. But it's just that I felt that my research findings needed a space to be addressed. So every time there was a forum, every time there was an opportunity, I went back and said, this is basically a queuing theory problem. What happened in World War II and brought women into the workforce is exactly what's happening in India. So my request to your leaders is just be mindful that in another 3 years, we are going to have a lot of people entering, but not enough people staying. And that subsequently, I went on to work with industry associations on jury and award process of diversity. And then my journey today, as I stand, is largely producing evidence. Because I have realized that the world of the corporations needs everything in numbers. I see wonderful activists unable to influence senior leaders because of their inability to speak the language of the corporation. And it's in that language of the corporation that today representation is the key. And I'm coming to exactly the same point that I've heard several speakers speak. But the logic that is on the table is that if there is no representation, where is participation? And if there is no participation, what are you talking about inclusion? And in that conversation comes equity, not as equity from a justice perspective, I understand it today, but it is about asking for, as an organization, are your structures and systems geared to make sure that women have equal opportunity to rise the ladder? Are your male sponsors ensuring that there are women there in that sponsorship list when they come up to you in terms of potential assessment processes that are going on? Are there women who are, every time you're opening up a position, are there enough women there for the panel to interview and meet? Okay. So in some ways, I think what's important role of an academic is to be able to ask these questions. So what began with gender went on to become multi-generational, went on to work with persons with disability. I now champion LGBTQ. My work is on scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and employment in the workforce. I believe that if you cannot include 50%, if you don't know, if you cannot, if you don't want to include 50% of the world's population, it's going to be even more difficult to do the 6%, 9%, and 14%. Okay, so in some ways, gender for me is a gateway to being able to hold corporations accountable. So what else do I do apart from producing all these reports and papers and just sending it off to people? I did a report for the National Stock Exchange before the 2013 amendment on one woman on the board. So I have a paper on building the leadership pipeline for women directors in India. Then I went back and looked at saying, what will it take to have more women on the boards? What you need is a leadership development program to have more women in senior management groups. So I went back and this is the 5th cohort that I'm running at IIM Bangalore, which is with my colleagues, which is Women in Leadership Program. We have about 160 amazing women leaders of corporations who are just kind of taking on newer roles. So today, as I am here on this panel, is there more to be done? Yes, no doubt, because as I am speaking here, continuously over the last 10 years, women in formal employment in the Indian context is dropping. Women's participation in economic activities is dropping. So in some ways, it's a journey. Has COVID offset this even worse? Yes, it has. Middle-class, educated, urban Indian women is as vulnerable today with patriarchy. I completely concede what I've heard from others, but the fragility today is across the board. So does this mean that we have to go back to the drawing board in some way and make it more integrated, more holistic? And like Tanzila said, should we have to collaborate even more than what we have done in the past? Yes, yes, and yes. Let me pause there.
Thank you very much. May I just pick up on one of the many threads I'd love to pick on Professor Vasanthi. One of them was the COVID experience, and some people, and I think in our organization we can see some ways in happened. We can see some negative obviously impacts. But people have talked more about compassion. People have talked more about empathy, more about mental health, more about flexible working, more about understanding the challenges of work and home, and particularly under the pandemic, the way they blur. Are you seeing areas of promise for greater gender equality coming out of these conversations around those sorts of subjects, and what can one do to sort of water and nurture them?
I will start with a yes and then add a no. So yes, I see a lot of leaders demonstrating compassion, flexibility, empathy. I've seen all the best of human behavior in corporations over the first 9 months. The interesting one is that along with that conversations, I also hear that productivity has improved. And that rings a bell, an alarm bell for me, because as productivity improves, you're going to perpetuate these processes because they make you profitable. So work coming home is the new normal. And what does it mean in terms of the interaction and intersectionality between technology and human, and the technology and women who were already on a double shift even earlier before the pandemic? Okay, so the intersectionality and what in an academic world we call socio-materiality, which is the material, the laptop influencing my life and my entire ways of thinking. What is this going to mean in terms of women's health? Or what is it going to mean in terms of employee health? I think that's an equally important one. More neuroscience is showing that brain has got rewired over the last few months, and we are all compulsive notification seekers on the mobile. And that if there is a WhatsApp ping, we just feel compelled to open our mobile phones. So what is this kind of technology coming into homes going to do about mental health of employees in general, with a particular emphasis on women, persons with disability, LGBTQ? Yeah, I think those conversations have not yet begun. The bigger one that worries me when I said what more is needed, Adrian, I'm a great believer in structures and systems and processes. Okay, are the structures and systems and processes changing at the rate at which human empathy and compassion is evoked? That's where the true test lies, because how are you going to measure performance of individuals and actually assign bonuses to them? Are you going to use the old metrics of what you did in the past, or are you going to look at new metrics? How are you going to assess potential of people in a virtual world? So I would want those conversations, not productivity, not empathy as being a human, but empathy as being a leader, institutionalizing empathy in the systems and processes.
Sorry, just coming off mute. Thank you very much, Professor Vasanti. I think we've got time. We're to the end of the session, but I think it will be nice to give each panelist a chance to make a particular kind of a sort of closing remark, and then I'll hand back to Deepa, who will sort of close the whole summit and perhaps reflect on some thinking around ways forward and how we might continue this conversation, which I'm finding and have found fascinating. I suppose. Why don't we open it up? Why don't I just keep it open-ended? I mean, we were sort of invited to think about ways forward, but we're not required to conclude them in the 40-minute panel discussion. So I think what I'd like to just hand over to each panelist in a second, and just invite you to give sort of closing remarks. And for my part, for the British Council's part, I think so many of the issues which have been discussed are very real, very pressing, very urgent. they're not issues which any organization or any individual is going to crack alone. They're multi-stakeholder. I love this idea of collaborating and celebrating others' work. And, so I think the stuff, we remain committed. I'm very pleased that the panel, you were chosen because you're so eminent and so impressive and so inspiring. But I'm also very pleased that you've had contact with the British Council. So I'm pleased that our work in this space, which we're committed to, giving opportunity to people.
Adrian, sorry for interjecting, but I must say that I also have a connect to British Council. And in 2007, when I decided to begin my work on ethics, I was a British Council scholar at the Nottingham University Business School, International Center for Corporate Social Responsibility. Okay, so that's a connection. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. One of our better decisions. So let me just say, for our part, we're committed to the work and continuing to work with partners and friends and allies across the region. Recognizing we have as much or more to learn, but we'll remain committed and a participant in this. So. Shall we just go around in the same order in which we started up for final closing comments, if that works? So Anoka, could we come to you first?
Sure, Adrian. So it was amazing listening to all of you. So just a couple of pointers, because I also noticed a question that was asked as well about GBV in the workplace as well. Because I worked in corporate before as well. I wanted to work in all these different sectors, government, corporate, civil sector, all of it, so that I had a very clear understanding of how to engage all of these different people and, speak the language, so to speak, to bring them onto the same table, because it's not easy unless you're able to appeal to their inner goodness of sorts. So I do think that if you are trying to bring men on board and make them into allies, you really do need to sort of appeal to their sense of humanity, really, at the end of the day, and sense of decency and common upbringing, and how you would want anyone, and this whole concept of not just it's your daughter, it's your somebody, it's not just about that, it's about how you treat your fellow human, really, your fellow human being, and having that sense of respect, really, that has worked really great for us, especially for me, because I used to work in corporate, and believe me, it was quite tough as well. So just bringing that point up, and definitely collaboration, because I do understand, for example, I work in entrepreneurship and climate change, but I also understand there are so many different other sectors that are very cross-cutting. These are all cross-cutting each other. So it's so important to come out of those silos, because, these are incredible people from across the world or the globe or the region or country, really. So bringing everyone to the same table, just coming up with ways, to sort of just collaborate and bring everyone together, that works in an amazing way to get the best out of everything and to have a much bigger impact. Because what usually happens is one action might have a tiny ripple, but if everyone sort of works together, then you can address not just one issue, but everything that's interconnected and interlinked in a way that is a lot more impactful, and will have a lot more long-term sustainability as well. That's what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would echo both of those summary comments, Anoka. Collaboration, also appealing to humanity and to decency, and to how we want to treat and be treated. Yeah, all genders. Thank you. Farah has had to move, as we know. So let's move now to Tanzila, if we may.
Thank you so much. I completely resonate with what Anuka has said and what Vasanti has said. And my two giveaways or takeaways would be that we must have an inclusive mindset for all levels and not just for our beneficiaries. Because I don't think, a group such as beneficiaries exist. We all are beneficiaries. We all are providers of opportunities. And I think my life changed when I stopped seeing myself as a beneficiary and I became the employer. I became someone who is meant to give opportunities. There is no other option for me. I am supposed to be someone who wakes up in the morning, creates more jobs. And I think my life changed. The people who were working with me, their lives changed when they saw me coming to the office, going to the bathroom, getting off from my wheelchair, sitting on the office chair as a woman who covers her head. I think that's where the real power is. So just to change the dynamics and have a more inclusive policy on all levels, that'll be great. And to stop treating a group of people just as beneficiaries and not to work for them, but with them. And now that's where the real birthday party is. So that is what my one giveaway is. And the other one is to have accountability, to speak up for each other's organizations if we see any behavior or any practice that is malpractice. I think we should speak up for each other and take ownership of each other's causes. I think that would really make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanzila. Yeah, and on the issue of race, for example, we've just launched a global policy which moved us into that space, which moved us into the requirement that we should call out bad practice. It isn't enough to raise an eyebrow, as it were. One has to, in an appropriate way, challenge. Make sure you've understood and then challenge. Yeah, so great to hear that. Thank you, and thank you for the takeaways, which we will take away. Thank you, Professor Vasanti. Over to you, please.
Yeah, I think COVID has given us an opportunity, and I think this is that opportunity that I want to call out on, which is it offers us spaces for conversations now which are multi-sector, because all of us have shared grief, have shared hurt, have suffered damage. So in a way, it's been a great leveler. And all of us for the first time have experienced uncertainty of a magnitude that threatened lives. Yeah. So I think when such a leveler happens, there is a well of emotions into which one can tap into. And this is a great space for cross-sector collaborations. I'm just building on the theme of collaboration that Anoka started and Tanzila also mentioned. But what's the level of those collaborations, of cross-sector? Coming out of that, what can we do more to help people build partnerships and alliances? I think all of South Asia is resource constrained. So people want to fend for themselves. So how do you teach them how to build partnerships and alliances? And maybe we should spend some time, because it's not, mindset is important, but designing cooperation and collaboration opportunities and thinking about it systemically is equally important. And last but not the least, the choose to challenge hashtag has spoken largely on biases, but I want to just push that to question self-limiting beliefs. Choose to challenge self-limiting beliefs. Choose to challenge the enemies while you call out the allies. So I think there are just so many spaces on choosing to challenge. And just as I see Tanzila and Anoka, and in them as role models lies the future for challenge. Yeah, challenge is really, it's that new generation that's actually going to challenge. And how do we create more spaces for maybe millions of Tanzilas and Anokas? And that, I think, is a question all of us sitting here who are above whatever, I'm not going to call out the age, but wherever you are in that spectrum, just ask what is it that we are doing to enable them. Let me stop there. Thank you, Adrian.
Brilliant. Thank you, Professor Vasanti. That's a fantastic way to close out. Those people who have the misfortune to work with me know that I'm an arch delegator. So I will now delegate to Deepa, but there might be a couple of things I delegate to her. I think your idea of how do we teach people to build partnerships and alliances is a very, very interesting question if we find ourselves coming together do in the future. And yeah, I mean, what better way to close this 2-day summit than the idea of creating millions more and Tanzilas to make the world a better place. So Deepa, over to you. Deepa, are you there?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you, because I'm not able to hear anybody else, but for the last 2 minutes, but it doesn't matter if you're able to hear me, that's great. So, I mean, it's now, I think, time to wrap up. And we come to the conclusion of 2 days of really intense deliberations, discussions, passionate speeches, and a lot of shared experiences, and forward thinking. I mean, from talking about what leadership means to us, talking about what it means to us in the South Asian context, what realities are like, gender-based violence, how to empower women economically, socially, and talking about representation across the board, across various different types of domains. I think this has been a very, very, very interesting and very important conversation that we've had. I mean, just to explain what the magnitude has been, we have had 4 panels, we've had 4 workshops, we've had 2 fireside chats, and one keynote address, all of which kind of spoke about gender equality and the role that each and every one of us have to play in making this a reality. As British Council, as an organization, we are committed. Our focus remains on ensuring inclusion and equality in outcomes for women and girls, and on the integration of gender equality in all the work that we do. Now, this summit has enabled us to connect with a really powerful group of thought leaders, practitioners, and influencers on the issue of gender equality. We would be keen to remain in touch with this group, if possible, reconvene after a certain length of time. And ultimately, we hope that we can evolve into some sort of a forum where we can exchange ideas, a sort of a multi-stakeholder group, and as Vasanthi mentioned, a multi-sectoral group of shared experiences. I think that would be a really positive outcome for this really good workshop that we had. So, I mean, that's as far as the summarizing the proceedings is concerned. And finally, a pleasant task of saying thank you to everybody who has been with us in this journey, to all the 28 speakers who have been on various panels representing different sectors, different countries in the South Asia region. Thank you very much for your generosity and in sharing your insights and your wisdom with us. Thank you to all the audience who have been with us in these last 2 days, being part of this session. And thank you to my colleagues at the British Council across the 4 countries where we worked together to bring you this summit. And last but not the least, thank you to CSR Box, who have been our delivery partner in making this a smooth and flawless experience. So from all of us here at the British Council, thank you very much, and have a great evening, or whatever time of day you are in your part of the world. Have a good one. Bye-bye, and have a great day. Bye-bye.